Chapter 652. After figuring this out, Lin Yuan quickly realized why there was a carrier of laws chasing after him. It was because he was not the god of the underworld chosen by this world. His roots were not in the Tianwu continent. Even if he created his own underworld one day, it would eventually belong to the world of his previous life. This action was the same as directly using a knife to cut the flesh of this world. The appearance of a spirit item of this level, even if it was the will of this world, would have to pay a heavy price. From the way the system hoped that its host could become an existence that could compete with Hong Jun, it could only slowly strengthen him. Through various transactions, it could be seen that everything in this world did not appear for no reason. And this world had paid a heavy price to help an outsider. It was reasonable for it to chase after Lin Yuan in anger. However, it was very obvious that a spirit item that could transform an ordinary creature into a god would have to pay a heavy price to exist in this world. Theoretically, everything in this world did not happen without reason. If one wanted to obtain it, they had to pay a price. In order to become the god of the underworld, after consuming the dragonization root, one would have to endure the corresponding backlash during the evolution process. However, there did not seem to be any creature in this world that could endure this backlash. Therefore, other than Lin Yuan, everyone who consumed the dragonization root had become monsters without exception. Even Lin Yuan was actually a failure. He was also unable to endure the complete evolution power of the dragonization root. It was only because of the system's intervention that he successfully completed the evolution. However, he stopped at the level of a flood dragon and did not become the god of the underworld that this world's will wanted. His success was not because he could endure the backlash of the dragonization root. It was because during the evolution process, the system had already estimated the limit that Lin Yuan could endure. It had intervened at the critical point and expelled the excess evolution power from Lin Yuan's body. According to the Xuanhuan novels in his previous life, this should be a clash between the wills of two worlds. As the heavenly Tao of the primordial world, the system was definitely stronger than the Tianwu continent's will. However, the heavenly Tao was stolen by Hong Jun. It was just an incomplete body. Therefore, the clash between the two sides did not have a clear victor. The dragonization root still affected Lin Yuan. With the power of the underworld's black water, Lin Yuan had another choice. This caused Lin Yuan to break free from the system's control and become an equal trader. He was not a puppet that could be abandoned at any time after completing the system's goal. Therefore, this was a situation where both sides suffered losses. The only one who had an advantage was Lin Yuan as the battlefield. Looks like my trip to the Western Sea Dragon Palace was not without benefits. Lin Yuan opened his mouth and showed a smile that was even more ferocious than that of a demon beast. In his mind, a crazy and daring thought was brewing. The dragonman's green vertical pupils contracted slightly. Half. This was different from what it expected. More importantly, Lin Yuan's answer was not wrong. However, it was not the straightforward truth. On the contrary, Lin Yuan's words contained a deep sense of mockery and ridicule. It was as if it had unknowingly made a huge mistake. What about the other half? The dragon man pursed its lips and asked subconsciously. You. Lin Yuan maintained his sinister smile as he looked at the dragon man. Do you really want to know? Gulp. The dragon man swallowed his saliva. His expression was not good. Subconsciously, he wanted to give an affirmative answer, but he had a premonition that there was a great terror behind this question. The stronger a demonic beast was, the stronger its sense of danger was. Just like how ordinary creatures could always foresee natural disasters, a flood dragon like Lin Yuan had prepared one after another before heading south to the Western Sea Dragon Palace. A top demonic beast like the Dragon Man would naturally have a more terrifying premonition than Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan and the Dragon Man were not the only ones who knew about this conversation. There were countless pairs of eyes in the Western Sea Dragon Palace staring at them. The moment it sensed the warning, it even felt that it might have gone crazy. It was as if the Dragon Man only needed to nod his head slightly and the entire Western Sea Dragon Palace would vanish. Do you feel danger? Lin Yuan maintained his sinister smile as he said word by word, don't be confused. Your premonition is real. The dragonman's expression changed. It looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. For a moment, it forgot what to say. Intuition was a possibility that all creatures had. It could instinctively sense danger, but it did not mean that other creatures could also sense this danger. But looking at Lin Yuan's reaction, it was as if he already knew all of this. He also knew that if he answered this question, the Western Sea Dragon Palace would be destroyed. It suddenly panicked. In its long life, it had seen countless powerful enemies. There were humans from the land, demonic beasts, and many indescribable creatures in the deep sea. It had even seen many creatures on the other side of the Heaven's Gate. According to the words of the dragon ancestors, it seemed that outside the Sky Martial continent, there were many more terrifying existences. But it had never seen such a strange existence like Lin Yuan. A demonic beast that had not even reached the desolate demonic realm. It had not even been 2 years since he was born, and he had casually created countless miracles. Who knew how many pairs of greedy eyes stared at Lin Yuan, hoping to bite off a piece of meat from Lin Yuan. But it was obvious that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was the first force to make a move on Lin Yuan. But with just a simple question, the shadow of destruction had enveloped the Western Sea Dragon Palace. Now, let me ask you one last time. Do you want to know what the other half is? Lin Yuan's voice suddenly became low and hoarse. It was as if a devil from hell was whispering into a human's ear, tempting a human to fall into depravity for his own desires. The dragon man subconsciously wanted to nod its head, but it was instantly jolted awake. It roared, "No. I don't want to know." For some reason, when it said those words, the dragon man inexplicably heaved a sigh of relief. That was because the great terror in the dark had disappeared at that moment, as if nothing had happened. It was only at that moment that it realized that its light purple robe had been completely soaked by the seawater. It was laughable because dragons didn't have sweat glands on their bodies. However, that momentary lapse in concentration still caused the surrounding seawater to soak its light purple robe, making it look even more pathetic than if it had been drenched in cold sweat from fright. Chapter 653. What a pity. The smile on Lin Yuan's face gradually faded. The power of the system was very strong. Even if it was damaged, it was still a heavenly Tao-level existence. Killing a group of desolate demon realm monsters was a piece of cake for it. However, the system had its limitations. Before the rules were violated, it could not directly interfere with the operation of the world, unless its opponent was in existence on the same level as it. Inquiring about or confirming the system's existence would be a violation of the rules. Once the Draconids had nodded to delve into the matter, everyone, including the listeners, who might exist, would face the system's wrath head-on, and it would not be impossible for them to destroy the entire Western Sea Dragon Palace. Lin Yuan no longer had a good impression of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Even if they were mutants from the primeval world, they were not worthy of Lin Yuan's special treatment. In the absence of true dragons, the so-called dragon race might not even compare to the mysterious incubus. The system's existence should be a mystery. Even the true dragons of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas might not know, or perhaps they had reached a tacit understanding with the system to remain silent. Otherwise, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would not treat Lin Yuan like this. However, the true dragons might not know about the system, but a desolate demon realm beast Master Kirin of the Hengduan Mountains knew about it. Regardless of how far the incubus had walked on the path of cultivation known as the desolate demon realm, it might not be as powerful as a cultivator of a higher level if they really fought. Yet, the system could not do anything to the incubus. Under the incubus' little trick, the system could no longer freely explore Lin Yuan's heart. It could hear Lin Yuan's thoughts, but 80% of them were fabricated by Lin Yuan, while the remaining 20% were deliberately made up by Lin Yuan. Ignoring power and cultivation, in terms of value, befriending the incubus might be more beneficial than befriending the entire Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. As soon as he finished speaking, the rope tied around Lin Yuan's neck broke inch by inch and fell to the ground like an ordinary hemp rope. The dragonoid's face instantly darkened. Even if it did not speak, Lin Yuan could imagine that this kind of treasure that could make people involuntarily speak the truth was definitely not simple. It was possible that this rope came from the untainted world, but it should not have reached the level of a primordial magic treasure. However, among the acquired magic treasures, it was one of the best. After all, in terms of the law of causality, it could make people involuntarily speak the truth. It was almost equivalent to the copper coin of treasure fall, which could make all the treasures in the world fall. It was just that this kind of thing could not be used against the enemy, so its rating was slightly lower. The treasure was indeed not bad, but it had chosen the wrong opponent. Was the heavenly Tao something that anyone could pry into? The dragon man remained silent for a moment with a gloomy expression, but in the end, he did not explode with anger. He stepped forward and sat down on a coral throne. His green eyes coldly sized up Lin Yuan as he said coldly, "You mean, you don't actually have the means to purify your bloodline at all, and you were able to evolve into a WYRM dragon purely because you were lucky, right?" Lin Yuan smiled and nodded. Without that strange rope, there was no need for him to speak at all. In fact, it would be best if he did not speak. He had destroyed a treasure that could be said to be of the best quality. If the two of them were in different positions, it would not be a great profit, but if there were no benefits that could make up for the loss in the end, then the existence that destroyed the treasure would definitely not have a good ending. However, the dragon man suppressed his anger and did not flare up on the spot. It was very clear that since it already knew that Lin Yuan's success could not be replicated, and that even if it succeeded, it would have to pay a huge price, it still did not label Lin Yuan as a dead man. Instead, it showed that it was willing to continue the discussion. This meant that the dragon man still had a deep fear of Lin Yuan. This fear might have come from the ancient demon court behind Lin Yuan, who did not know if it existed or not. It might also have come from the great terror it sensed when it asked the question just now. "Then do you think you can return to the northern frontier in one piece?" The dragon man was so angry that he laughed and asked Lin Yuan in a cold voice. The dragon palace of the four seas was undoubtedly one of the top forces in the world. The so-called sea monsters were no different from the land monsters. They were all existences that were struggling at death's door under the human army. Once the seemingly powerful outer sea monsters lost the protection of the sea, they might not be able to fight against the land monsters that had fought against the humans for many years in the Hengduan Mountains. However, the dragon palace of the four seas was a force that was independent of the monster system. Although the few true dragon ancestors had not been born, they were experts that could make the guardians of the heavenly gate, who stood at the top of the world, avoid. Regardless of whether it was in terms of foundation or strength, the dragon palace of the four seas had enough confidence to start a war with any force on the Tianwu continent. Lin Yuan crossed his arms in front of his chest and said expressionlessly, "I'm afraid that regardless of whether you can extract benefits from me or not, you won't let me return to the northern frontier, unless," at this point, a mocking smile appeared on Lin Yuan's face, "the demon court will attack and beat you until you're afraid. Only then will you have no choice but to respectfully send me back." The dragon man did not reply, but he did not hide the shock on his face. What kind of existence was the ancient demon court? It was a powerful force formed by itinerant cultivators and monsters from the primordial world. Even though it was not inferior to Hong Jun and his lackeys, it was impossible for it to be a weakling to be able to work together to shatter the primordial world and hide in the endless sea of bitterness when Hong Jun occupied the 4-9 heavenly Daos. The few dragon ancestors that the dragon palace of the four seas relied on the most were just cats and dogs on the periphery of the ancient demon court. Otherwise, when the ancient demon court was destroyed, the few dragon ancestors would not have been able to survive. However, what happened back then? The ancient demon court, which was so powerful that it was invincible, quietly collapsed. One by one, the top experts fell and fled. They either did not have any corpses left or disappeared without a trace. Today, the ancient demon court had even become one of the inheritances that had been destroyed from the world. Other than the top experts who had survived from that era, no cultivator or monster would have the slightest respect for the ancient demon court. However, the dragon palace of the four seas clearly did not belong to those ignorant people. They knew how powerful the ancient demon court was. Even if the other party had disappeared for countless years, they would try their best to satisfy some of Lin Yuan's requests instead of pretending to comply and secretly trying to extract benefits from Lin Yuan. It was precisely because they knew how powerful the ancient demon court was that they had high hopes for Lin Yuan, who was known as the reincarnation of the ancient demon emperor. They felt that Lin Yuan had really mastered the means to purify the dragon bloodline. Moreover, because of Lin Yuan's legendary battle achievements and monstrous advancement speed, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas firmly believed that Lin Yuan was from the demon court. Chapter 654. However, the ancient demon court had been dead for many years. Even if there were still remnants in the world, they were only peripheral members back then, or cultivators similar to the Heavenly Gate Guardians who had obtained the inheritance of the demon court cultivators. Whether it was humans or demonic beasts, there was only one attitude towards the ancient demon court that had been prosperous back then: keep quiet. Perhaps even the old monsters who had survived from that era did not know what had happened back then. Otherwise, they might not have been able to survive until now. Naturally, the major events that had happened back then were gradually forgotten. Even the ancient demon court had begun to be forgotten. The group of survivors back then also began to form their own forces. After a long period of development and reproduction, some were cut off, and some were strong. The experts of the older generation did not appear, and the new generation formed their own social circles. To be honest, the current cultivation forces were actually survivors of the ancient demon court. However, they had been divided into different forces, and no one called themselves the descendants of the ancient demon court. Until Lin Yuan, an anomaly, appeared. Many old monsters hidden in the depths of the world were shocked to discover that the ancient demon court might have never perished. However, even if the ancient demon court still existed, not many cultivators would take them seriously. After being isolated from the world for so many years, even if they were a ferocious tiger in the past, they should have rotted to the point that even their bones could not be found. In fact, this was indeed the case. This was because the only person who claimed to be the ancient demon court was Lin Yuan of unknown origins. This spokesperson of the demon court was now only a mountain lord. He was not even considered a top expert in the mortal world, let alone in the eyes of the Heavenly Gate Guardians. The decline of the demon court was obviously an indisputable fact. Therefore, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had set up some difficulties to force out Lin Yuan's trump card, or the hidden demon court elder behind Lin Yuan. However, Lin Yuan only killed a crab general and swaggered into the Dragon Palace. The methods that had been prepared beforehand were taken out individually to argue with an existence who could casually kill demonic beasts of the same level and leave them without a corpse. The only result was that the mainstays loyal to the Dragon Palace would continue to die until the Dragon Palace felt sorry for them and took the initiative to withdraw them. With that in mind, the Draconians removed all of their arrangements and chose to face Lin Yuan directly. But now, it still didn't get any benefits from Lin Yuan. Not only did it destroy a treasure, but it also didn't get any valuable information from Lin Yuan. But to say that there were no gains was obviously not the case. At the very least, it could tell the dragon ancestors that Lin Yuan was really the spokesperson of the ancient demon court. This was because the terror of being caught between life and death was clearly not something that could be felt by just anyone. If it wanted to, it could destroy the West Sea Dragon Palace with a single thought. Unless the dragon ancestors stepped in, there was no way they could fight it. Such a threat definitely did not come from a flood dragon at the Mountain Lord level. Thus, there was only one possibility: Lin Yuan had not come south alone. At the very least, there was an expert of the ancient Fey court hiding by his side. The Draconians didn't hide their surprise at all. Lin Yuan could tell what they were thinking at a glance. However, this was very normal. With a top faction like the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas behind it, it had a few true dragons supporting it, and it also had a treasure that could make people involuntarily speak the truth. No matter what identity this Draconians had, it was certain that this fellow was a flower that had not experienced much. Perhaps it had a lot of experience and a high cultivation level, but it didn't mean that it was shrewd. After all, the growth of any creature was based on some kind of painful lesson, and such a lesson obviously wouldn't appear in the upper echelons of a top faction like this. After all, the other top factions wouldn't be so bored as to become enemies with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, and those who coveted the heritage of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas weren't strong enough to threaten them. Such an environment undoubtedly formed a sick cycle. Unless the dragon race of the Four Seas fell one day, or the world was in chaos to the point where it could threaten the existence of the dragon race, these members of the dragon race would quickly give birth to a group of independent existences after paying a painful price. What if such a person couldn't be born? The dragon race of the Four Seas would be destroyed from then on. A flower of fortune and an unorthodox person like Lin Yuan were obviously not on the same level, at least in terms of acting skills. Lin Yuan could tell what the Draconians were thinking from their expressions, eyes, tone, and small actions. He could deduce if something he said had affected this Draconians with a high cultivation level. However, on the other hand, the Draconians could only see indifference and ridicule on Lin Yuan's face. There were no factors that would expose Lin Yuan's true thoughts. Phew, the Draconians let out a deep breath and said with a cold gaze, "Black Jiao, I have to say that we underestimated the ancient demon court. However, this doesn't mean that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas is really afraid of the ancient demon court. No matter how many terrifying existences are hiding behind you, they are in fact people who can't see the light of day. Otherwise, they would have jumped out long ago. How would the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate have the chance to dominate the Tianwu continent?" At this point, Lin Yuan showed a surprised and dignified expression quite cooperatively. Ancient Demon Court? What did the Ancient Demon Court have to do with him? A force formed by a group of refugees from the Great Wastelands might be extremely powerful in the eyes of the natives of the Tianwu continent, but in Lin Yuan's eyes, they were just a group of cowards who couldn't do anything. Even if they had some tricks up their sleeves, it was impossible for them to fight against Hongjun. As long as there were one or two people who were qualified to carry the flag, the Tianwu continent would still be under the rule of the Demon Court. But in reality, when Hongjuan's vanguard army arrived, the ancient Demon Court was quickly annihilated. They either died or left, completely disappearing without a trace. The natives of the Tianwu continent could withstand the attacks of Hongjuan's minions. Could it be that the ancient Demon Court, which had given them cultivation techniques and suppressed all the natives until they couldn't breathe, couldn't withstand it? It wasn't that they couldn't withstand it, but they had been scared by Hongjun and no longer had the courage to face Hongjun. Therefore, to Lin Yuan, a group of cowards was a tiger's skin at the right time to scare the natives of the Tianwu continent. When it wasn't the right time, even if the big shots of the ancient demon court returned, they would have to obediently stand by the side and watch his performance. They definitely wouldn't have the chance to criticize him. If he couldn't even deal with the defeated person who was beaten into a stray dog by Hongjun, how could he talk about facing Hongjun? Seeing Lin Yuan's expression, the dragon man believed that he had grasped Lin Yuan's weakness. He smiled and said, "However, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was born from the ancient demon court. We still admit this. In a sense, we are family, aren't we?" Chapter 655. Following the dragonoid's sudden change of topic, Lin Yuan's face also revealed a puzzled expression. But this time, it was not an act. He was really stunned. Was this fellow trying to rope him in? How big of a heart did he have to think that after a series of unpleasantness, they would still be able to sit down and cooperate peacefully? Furthermore, it was only after the other party raised a stupid question and sensed the threat of the system that they agreed to cooperate. Lin Yuan did not know how to evaluate this dragonoid's actions. Its cultivation and status were not low, so its intelligence should not be too big of a problem. Therefore, this fellow's EQ was probably not too good. Perhaps it was considered to have a high EQ among the Four Seas dragon race, but in front of ordinary demonic beasts or humans, its actions should be considered to be confusing, right? Therefore, I feel that we can cooperate. The dragonoid sat on the coral throne, crossed its arms, and smiled. Ning Tiansheng is a member of our dragon race. The news about you has already been reported to me, so I feel that you should know that we have placed some spies in the human territories to control them. But you should know the current situation of the demonic beasts, so we can only secretly control a portion of the territories. Even if we want to give back to the Dragon Palace, we can only do it through transactions. Not to mention the low efficiency, there are also some transactions that are prohibited, so, the dragonoid looked like it wanted to say something but stopped. It did not state its intentions, because it felt that Lin Yuan should understand its intentions. In fact, Lin Yuan did understand the dragonoid's intentions. It wanted to use the name of the northern frontier to control the Azure River Empire and even more human territories. Looking at the entire Tianwu continent, humans and demonic beasts were in a situation where they would not rest until one of them was dead. Only Lin Yuan, an anomaly, had used the Demonic Emperor's Association to establish a firm foundation for him to rule over the human territories. At least on the surface, no one could find fault with Lin Yuan. The king of the northern frontier was Li Zhong, who was deeply loved by the people of the northern frontier, while Lin Yuan was just a wild god conferred by the Shenwu dynasty. It did not matter what the relationship between Li Zhong and Lin Yuan was. After all, Lin Yuan had the tiger skin of the ancient demon court and the Hengduan mountains behind him. Moreover, he was a dragon bloodline demon beast. Whether it was on the surface or in the dark, Lin Yuan was a very difficult existence to deal with. Therefore, no dynasty or top force would be so free as to fight Lin Yuan to the death. What they needed was just a fig leaf to deceive those ignorant ordinary people, to show that the northern frontier and even the entire northern territory of the Shenwu dynasty were still under the control of human beings. As long as Lin Yuan did not announce that he was the ruler of the northern frontier, the various forces would not fall out with Lin Yuan, even if they knew that the situation was gradually getting out of control. After all, no one was willing to be the first to stand out and cause both sides to suffer or even perish together. You want to use the name of the Demonic Emperor's Association? Lin Yuan frowned slightly and said decisively, "Someone has told me about this before, but I'm sorry, no force will allow a force similar to the Demonic Emperor's Association to rise. Even the Demonic Emperor's Association in the northern frontier cannot infiltrate other regions. Otherwise, it will attract the crazy attacks of countless cultivators, because no one wants to become the next Shenwu dynasty." The Dragon Man still did not hide the change in his expression and said in a deep voice, "You may have misunderstood me. I have no intention of letting the northern frontier take action. Our Dragon Palace has already launched an all-out plan against the Qingjiang dynasty. As long as there is a suitable reason, we can wipe out the Qingjiang dynasty's royal family at any time. We have even placed some people in the victorious army. Together with the demon beasts of Wei River, Yun River, and the coast, we can instantly defeat all the troops of the Qingjiang dynasty loyal to the royal family. Therefore, I only hope that the northern frontier can cooperate with us." "Impossible." Lin Yuan shook his head lightly and said expressionlessly, "The consequence of doing so is that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas will take over all the territory of the Qingjiang dynasty. Then, the northern frontier will bear the infamy and the consequences. They might even cross the Hengduan mountain range at all costs and directly backstab our northern frontier. I don't want to bear this loss, and I can't bear it." Because he knew the consequences of doing so, Lin Yuan rejected them very straightforwardly. Even Lin Yuan dared to think about it but did not dare to do it. Now, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas wanted to bribe him? He was able to take over the northern frontier because there was a problem with everyone's information. In addition to the internal conflicts of the Shenwu dynasty, he was able to succeed. After that, taking over the Shenwu dynasty's northern territory was something that Lei Qiusheng tacitly agreed to. As long as he did not offend the public, no one would say anything about Lin Yuan taking over such a territory. Moreover, Lin Yuan even used his tiger skin to share the cake with those top forces. However, after the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas took over the Qingjiang dynasty, things took a turn for the worse. Firstly, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas said that they did not want to contribute to the northern frontier. In fact, they were worried that the northern frontier would take the opportunity to take over the territory. Therefore, after the matter was settled, Lin Yuan would definitely not get a share of the benefits. However, the Demon Emperor Association was the one who took over the Qingjiang dynasty in name. Even if he wanted to use benefits to shut the mouths of the top forces, he could not do anything. After all, Lin Yuan only took over 1/5 of the Shenwu dynasty's territory. The Northern Territory had not even resumed production. Even if he was very resourceful, it was impossible for him to use such a piece of land. He even took out the benefits that should be given after taking over the Qingjiang dynasty. Even if he could take it out, what right did he have to pay for the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas? Moreover, Lin Yuan wanted to take over the Tianwu continent and not occupy the northern part of the Shenwu dynasty. He had to plan slowly and slowly take over the territories that he fancied and share the cake with the top forces. At the very least, he had to do this before he was strong enough. Furthermore, other than the top forces, he also had to take care of the reputation of the various empires. Otherwise, even if the top forces agreed to it tacitly, the empires would not sit by and watch Lin Yuan grow stronger. They would definitely join forces to attack the northern frontier. Lin Yuan was not naive enough to think that the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range would really start an all-out war with the few empires. If they really fought, even the demonic beast imperial court might not be able to protect him, not to mention sending troops to reinforce the northern frontier. Once the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas took action, in addition to the Sky Demon's chaos, they would be in a situation where they would be attacked from both sides. Even Lin Yuan could only obediently wait for death. So there's no room for discussion. After being rejected by Lin Yuan consecutively, the Dragonman's gaze turned dangerous. Both parties looked at each other for a moment. The Dragonman was so angry that he laughed and said coldly, "Black Jiao, you have to know that I am not negotiating with you. I am ordering you to do this in the name of the Dragon Palace of the West Sea. As a member of the dragon race, you should understand that the strength of the dragon race is your strength. Are you sure you want to put your personal benefits above the dragon race's benefits?" Chapter 656. Oh ho! Moral kidnapping? Lin Yuan grinned and sneered, "My attitude is right here. If you want spiritual objects that can purify your bloodline, I can send some to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas after I go back, but if you want something else, I can only say 3 words, impossible." What did the interests of the dragon tribe have to do with him? After the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas took over the territory of the Green River Empire, they would not recognize him. Even if the other empires and top forces wanted to find trouble, they would find trouble with Lin Yuan. After all, it was hard to say how much power the ancient demon court had left. However, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had dominated the Endless Sea for so many years. Naturally, it was not something that the newly risen northern frontier could compare with. The Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was the one who benefited, but Lin Yuan was the one who suffered. Not to mention the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, even the system would not dare to talk to Lin Yuan like this. No matter how arrogant the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was, could they be more arrogant than the Heavenly Way? "I think you're out of your mind." The Dragon Man could no longer hold back his anger. He smashed the armrest of the coral throne and growled, "Come, take this Black Jiao who doesn't respect the dragon tribe to the evil dragon pond and lock him up. Let him calm down for a few days. Come to me when he has thought it through." As soon as he finished speaking, 4 Dragon Palace subordinates with different postures rushed in and surrounded Lin Yuan. The weakest of the 4 Dragon Palace subordinates had the aura of the wild demon realm. It was evident that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was powerful. In the Hengduan Mountains, the existences of the desolate demon realm were all Beast King level existences that possessed vast territories. Even if they didn't have their own clan, they were still existences that were worshipped by the Monster Beast Palace. In terms of status, they weren't much worse than the Beast Kings outside. However, in the West Sea Dragon Palace, the desolate demon realm seemed to be just ordinary guards and servants that could be summoned at will. Of course, it could not be ruled out that the Dragon Palace of the West Sea was putting on a show for Lin Yuan to show how powerful the Dragon Palace of the West Sea was, so that Lin Yuan would be in awe and yearn for the dragon tribe of the Four Seas. But no matter which one it was, it didn't matter to Lin Yuan now. He had never expected that the West Sea Dragon Palace would be so greedy. They had used a transcendent artifact to control him the moment they arrived and tried to find out the true method to purify his bloodline. They had only restrained themselves after being warned by the system. Now, they wanted to use the Demon the Arch Association's name to take over the Azure River Empire, It was as if all the benefits in the world belonged to the dragon race of the Four Seas, and Lin Yuan, who had the dragon race's bloodline, should serve them for free. Lin Yuan had no doubt that if he hadn't appeared before the Dragonborn in the form of a puppet, the Dragonborn might have crippled him or controlled him with drugs. Then, they would have forced him into the Azure River Empire's battlefield and even used the opportunity to control him to devour the foundation he had painstakingly built in the northern frontier. By then, even his true body would have appeared in the war between the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the Azure River Empire. Any explanation would be futile. Although things hadn't developed to the worst stage yet, Lin Yuan still realized that he had become a prisoner. The backup plan he had prepared previously was completely useless. After all, he wasn't a true member of the ancient demon court. Even the threat that the Dragonborn feared was only a warning from the system. There wasn't really any top-notch expert hiding around as his protector. He couldn't count on the people from the northern frontier either. They might be able to wrestle with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas on land, but it was impossible for them to rescue him from the Endless Sea. Too careless. However, at this moment, Lin Yuan could only feel frustrated. Any one of the 4 desolate demon realm mid-laners was enough to make him suffer, let alone 4 desolate demon realm sea demons working together. Not to mention, there was still the mysterious dragon blade standing beside him. He didn't know if he was in existence above the desolate demon realm. If he resisted now, he would definitely die. West Sea Dragon Palace, I've learned my lesson. Lin Yuan stood where he was without any intention of resisting. He just sneered and said, I hope you won't regret your decision today. I look forward to our next meeting. 2 flowers bloomed, one on each side. Other than the Endless Sea where undercurrents were surging. In the past 1.5 months, many major events had happened on land. One of the most terrifying events was the collapse of the Shenwu dynasty's Shrine of Sheiji. Lei Qiusheng was the founding emperor of the Shenwu dynasty and overthrew everything that belonged to the Jiao family. Therefore, although there were no portraits and relics of the previous emperors in the Shrine of Gods and Emperors, and there were no Yin spirits of the previous emperors, there were still many civil and military officials or ancestors who were loyal to Lei Qiusheng. They all existed in the world as Yin spirits and enjoyed the nourishment of the Shenwu dynasty's fate. They could even absorb nutrients from the fate of the Shenwu dynasty to strengthen themselves. They were a higher level of existence than demons and monsters. They belonged to the category of cultivators without physical bodies. In the novels of Lin Yuan's previous life, they should be regarded as ghost cultivators. However, these Yin spirits existed because of the nourishment of the Shenwu dynasty's national luck. They usually recuperated in the Shrine of Sheiji. When necessary, they would take action to suppress evil cultists and hellish demonic beasts that appeared in the country. However, every time they took action, they had to recuperate for a long time and would absorb a part of the national luck. Therefore, unless absolutely necessary, these Yin spirits were not allowed to take half a step out of the Shrine of Sheiji. The meaning of their existence was to be the trump card of the various empires to ensure that their country would not perish. However, even with the nourishment of the national luck, a group of Yin spirits who might not even have reached the Tiangang realm when they were alive couldn't be very powerful. Therefore, Lei Qiusheng's trump card was Shen Lin Jun and not these Yin spirits. Even after the deal with Lin Yuan, Lei Qiusheng didn't hesitate or think about these Yin spirits. After all, they were a group of dead people. After losing the nourishment of the national luck, they would just disappear completely. Sadness and tears were all in the past. This kind of thing wouldn't tie down a formidable person like Lei Qiusheng. However, after losing the national luck, the power of these Yin spirits started to weaken continuously. The demons that were suppressed in various places started to appear, instantly causing a reign of terror. Without the protection of the Yin spirits, the army of the Shenwu dynasty that was already retreating in defeat completely collapsed under the attack of the Sky Demon army. Close to 10 million people died in battle, and several million people fled in disorder. No one in the entire Central Plains could stop the might of the Sky Demon. The Sky Demon's gaze returned to the northern frontier and the south. However, because of the arrangements made by Lin Yuan before entering the Endless Sea, the Sky Demon army didn't directly start a war with the northern frontier. Instead, they stationed their troops on the other side of the Wei River and sent their main forces to the south of the Shenwu dynasty. They continuously massacred evil cultists and southern interest groups to increase the number of their companions. Even the Qing River Navy suffered many losses. In the end, it was the guardians of the Heavenly Gate who brazenly stepped in and prevented the Sky Demon's chaos from spreading to the Qing River dynasty. Chapter 657. It was nighttime. Evil Dragon Pool. Lin Yuan was wearing a black robe and a pair of metal shackles on his hands. He followed behind a member of the dragon clan step by step. His dark eyes glanced around. He seemed to be very interested in the dungeon where the evil dragon was imprisoned. There were many prisons at the bottom of the sea used to imprison the evil dragon. It was said that the evil dragon in ancient times was directly nailed into the deep sea by the Dragon King with a special metal pillar. Whether the evil dragon was squeezed to death by the water pressure or starved to death, it was not a problem that the Dragon Palace needed to consider. However, as time passed, the old rules could no longer restrict the new generation of Dragon Clan. In other words, if they continued to follow the old rules, it would only make it harder for the Dragon Clan to survive. In the end, they would die out. Therefore, the current Dragon Clan did not have many rules. As long as they acted prudently and did not do anything that would make the other forces in the Tianwu continent view the Dragon Clan as an enemy, they would be fine. Logically speaking, what the Dragon Palace of the West Sea did to Lin Yuan was against the rules. However, Lin Yuan had dragon blood in his body and the northern frontier was a potential enemy of all the forces in the Tianwu continent. The Dragon Clan of the Four Seas would not feel embarrassed if they became enemies with the northern frontier because the northern frontier did not have the strength to threaten the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. However, even without the old rules, the number of evil dragons imprisoned at the bottom of the sea did not decrease. Just like the attitude of the Dragon Palace of the West Sea towards Lin Yuan, these Dragon Clan members who had strong bloodlines and were born with powerful strength were actually very proud. They never put any forces or individuals in their eyes. If it were not for the fact that the number of pure-blooded Dragon Clan members was too small, they would have ruled the Tianwu continent long ago. Other than a few extremely monstrous variants, no other creatures could compete with the Dragon Clan in terms of numbers. The arrogant Dragon Clan would naturally offend many people. Therefore, these members of the Dragon Clan were classified as evil dragons and imprisoned at the bottom of the sea by the Dragon Palace to appease the anger of the big shots. They would not be sentenced to death because the prison at the bottom of the sea was divided by individual strength and built at different depths of the sea. The cultivation of the guards was also different. However, all the necessities of life were provided. Other than the restriction of freedom, the living conditions there could be considered a vacation. In addition to the evil dragons, the prison at the bottom of the sea also imprisoned some special talents. Most of them were sea monsters or existences like Lin Yuan who could enter the deep sea. The dragon palaces of the Four Seas had a good attitude towards these talents, because they were eager for them to serve the dragon palaces or obtain some information from them. Therefore, they were not too harsh on them. Including Lin Yuan, he was not tortured. They only confiscated some of his belongings. However, those were just toys for Lin Yuan to pass the time at sea. The real important things, such as the familiar beast pouch, were all swallowed into the stomach of the puppet. There was no digestive organ, so the hollow puppet's body was suitable for storing things. Just stay here and don't cause any trouble. The higher-ups just want you to not die here. So, if other evil dragons come to teach an outsider like you a lesson, we won't interfere before your life is truly threatened. The warden of the prison at the bottom of the sea brought Lin Yuan here. He had a body similar to a human but had a shark's head. Under his blue skin, there were lumps of muscles. Lin Yuan could not sense his cultivation level. It could be seen that he was above the desolate demon realm. Lin Yuan curled his lips and glanced at the inside of the prison that was pushed open. The environment was good. It was a single room. The Dragon Palace of the West Sea probably took special care of land creatures like him. A special formation enveloped the space inside the room, so no seawater could enter. There was a bed, a wardrobe, a desk, and other furniture. Silently walking into his cell, Lin Yuan casually pulled a chair and sat down. The warden outside slammed the door, then led a group of men and quickly left the place. This group of sea monsters seems to covet land a lot. Lin Yuan's dark eyes flashed with a playful look. The sea monsters were completely different from what he had imagined. Almost all the subordinates of the Dragon Palace had the ability to move on land. For example, the warden's body was obviously a shark, but he had used some unknown method to create a body similar to a human's. If one ignored his shark head and blue skin, he looked like a 2-meter-tall muscular human. There were also existences like the bartender, dragon man, crab general, and octopus head. All of them had humanoid bodies. Even if they retained their biological characteristics, they stood upright and wore all kinds of clothes. Even without the ocean, they could move freely on land. Clearly, they had been drooling over the Azure River Empire, no, the entire Tianwu continent. It wasn't just a day or two ago. This world, it was far more interesting than Lin Yuan had imagined. The 7 great empires were under the control of the Heavenly Gate Guardians, but each of them had their own plans. Whether it was working with the sea monsters, or colluding with the monsters outside the Heavenly Gate like Lei Qiusheng, they all showed one thing: ambition. This was not good news, because the lower forces suppressed by the Heavenly Gate Guardians had given birth to ambition. This meant that the situation at the Heavenly Gate was far worse than what Lin Yuan had imagined. It could even be said that they did not have much energy left to interfere with the operations and changes of the forces on the continent. Perhaps, the Heavenly Gate Guardians did not throw the Sky Demon's problem to Lin Yuan purely out of malice. It was also possible that they really did not have enough manpower to deal with this matter. Although the Heavenly Gate Guardians could sense the existence of the Sky Demon, the Tianwu continent was so vast. If the Sky Demon insisted on hiding, even the Heavenly Gate Guardians could only use inefficient methods to slowly investigate. This would take a long time, and it was obviously not something they could afford. The battlefield was not a place to play around. The slightest deviation would cause countless people to pay with their lives. Outside the Tianwu continent, there were also existences like the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas. They were drooling over the resources and other things on the continent. Perhaps in the eyes of ordinary people, this world was still a prosperous and peaceful scene. At least, that was what the ordinary people of the 6 great empires thought. But in reality, countless threats had already surrounded this continent, and the crisis that was enough to destroy the world was growing day by day. If this continued, the Tianwu continent would welcome a great reshuffle, and the final victor would be Hongjun. Lin Yuan, the seed chosen by the Heavenly Tao, would also step into an extremely dangerous situation. Chapter 658. Time passed by slowly. Obviously, the sun could not be seen in the dark seabed. However, time was an existence that could not be ignored anywhere. The sea monsters obviously had their own way of recording time. 3 meals were provided in the morning and evening, and the quality was not bad. They were all dishes made from the flesh and blood of some powerful sea monsters, as well as soup and porridge made from underwater spiritual objects. The food supply of this underwater prison was better than Lin Yuan's imagination. A casual meal would be worth tens of thousands of gold if placed on the Tianwu continent. Even ordinary nobles might not be able to eat like this for every meal. However, in the Endless Sea, it was only prison food provided by the Dragon Palace. Unfortunately, Lin Yuan did not need to eat. The puppet body did not have any digestive organs, and did not need to replenish any energy. As long as Lin Yuan's consciousness did not dissipate, the puppet body was like a perpetual motion machine. Although Lin Yuan's original body was a Jiao dragon, it still retained some of the characteristics of a snake. At this moment, his original body was hibernating in the beast pouch. The consumption of energy was extremely small, and it could even be replenished by absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If it was in his previous life, perhaps the prison would have to worry about whether the prisoner would starve to death. However, in the world of cultivation, there was no such thing as starvation. Even if one's consciousness was not willing to eat, the body would automatically absorb spiritual energy to replenish its consumption. At most, it would be weak to the point of weakness, but it would not starve to death. In fact, ever since Lin Yuan stepped into the Mountain Lord realm, he rarely ate. Whether it was the flesh and blood of demonic beasts or spiritual objects, they were just nutrients that he had to absorb to maintain his bodily functions in the early stages of cultivation. They could also play a certain role in promoting his cultivation. However, as his cultivation gradually deepened, food that did not reach a certain level would not have such an effect. In fact, it would even interfere with the cultivation of the person who ate it because of the foreign spiritual energy it carried. Therefore, the majority of sea monsters and cultivators would not choose to satisfy their desire for food. Instead, they were like ascetics, absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to replenish their consumption. The efficiency was low and slow, but it was beneficial for cultivation. The food provided by the West Sea Dragon Palace would not affect Lin Yuan's cultivation, but it was also not something rare. Only the heavens knew if there was someone observing him in secret. Releasing his main body to eat would only bring him endless trouble. In fact, the West Sea Dragon Palace was naturally happy to see Lin Yuan's behavior of not eating any food. After all, no matter what terrifying existence this Black Jiao provoked, as long as they fought, the final victor would definitely be the Black Jiao. The West Sea Dragon Palace was still rather wary of Lin Yuan. Among the prisoners who were either mountain lords or early-stage Desolate Demon Realm cultivators, 12 wardens who were at the Desolate Demon Realm or above had suddenly appeared. Almost all of them were at the same level as the warden, and they had clearly appeared to keep an eye on Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan had been aware of all this for a long time, but he just lived according to the schedule of the underwater prison on time every day. Whether it was the evil dragons who came up to talk to him or the guards sent by the West Sea Dragon Palace, he had no intention of communicating with them. Therefore, the wardens of this underwater prison, whether they brought food to Lin Yuan or took away the leftovers after the meal time, did not have the opportunity to communicate with Lin Yuan. Every time they saw Lin Yuan, they would see Lin Yuan sitting cross-legged on the bed, maintaining a silence that did not seem like a living creature. Even his breathing could not be heard. However, during the free time after lunch, this non-living creature would quietly take a stroll in the activity area. In short, Lin Yuan's appearance and behavior were very strange in the eyes of these sea monsters who did not know his background. Other than the wardens who had received orders from the warden, no one was willing to take the initiative to communicate with Lin Yuan. "You over there, stop." During the activity time after lunch, a loud shout sounded from behind Lin Yuan. With the existence of the Eye of God, Lin Yuan didn't need to look back to see a pink starfish demonic beast behind him. Moreover, there were no other demon beasts around. This starfish demon beast was obviously targeting him. Obviously, the dragons of the West Sea Dragon Palace were quite dissatisfied with Lin Yuan's silent attitude. Therefore, they planned to find a few prisoners to teach Lin Yuan, an outsider who did not care about the interests of his race, a lesson. As for the existence of the ancient demon court, apart from the aura that Lin Yuan revealed when he first entered the West Sea Dragon Palace and was questioned, he seemed to have evaporated. Even the prison break that the West Sea Dragon Palace had expected did not happen. Therefore, it was obvious that the Tao protector that the ancient demon court had arranged for Lin Yuan did not mind that Lin Yuan was imprisoned in the underwater prison. As long as Lin Yuan did not reveal any key information and his life was not threatened, the other party could not be bothered with Lin Yuan. Therefore, the West Sea Dragon Palace was still fearless after a small lesson. After all, the Four Seas dragon race was not a pushover that anyone could pinch, right? "What's the matter?" Lin Yuan slowly turned his head and asked with a fake smile. Although Lin Yuan did not communicate with others, with the eye of the god and the ability to communicate with all living beings, Lin Yuan could easily spy on everything he wanted to spy on in this prison. Apart from not being sure of the other party's intentions, he even knew that there was another group of demon beasts monitoring him in this underwater prison. It might be a trap set up by the West Sea Dragon Palace, or it might not be. Therefore, Lin Yuan also put the other party on the alert list. If he wanted to know the other party's purpose, he had to wait for the other party to expose himself. After all, apart from taking turns to monitor Lin Yuan, the group of demon beasts did not even communicate with each other. There were so many living beings in the world. Apart from humans, there were many demon beasts and wild beasts that attacked their own cubs. Therefore, one should not be naive enough to think that other living beings would be kind to you. Therefore, all the living beings that Lin Yuan encountered did not mind using the greatest malice to guess the other party's psychological activities. However, the matter of the Lu family in mountain-blocking city had also given Lin Yuan a warning: do not casually cause trouble for yourself. Not provoking and not interfering was the best way. No matter what the other party's purpose was, Lin Yuan would not take the initiative to look for them before they really took action. This starfish demon beast could be considered a famous thorn in this prison. Its strength was at the 9th level of the Mountain Lord realm. Although it was not at the top, it was definitely one of the experts. Lin Yuan had thought that the West Sea Dragon Palace would find trouble with him, but he did not expect that the first ruthless character to come knocking on his door would be the guy in the underwater prison who was famous for hunting other prisoners to strengthen himself. Chapter 659. Were they planning to kill him? Or could it be that the Western Sea Dragon Palace didn't think that a demonic beast that was only a step away from the peak of the Mountain Lord realm would be able to cause trouble for Lin Yuan? Lin Yuan closed his eyes and began to recall the information he had about this starfish demonic beast. After it became a demonic beast, it retained most of the characteristics of a starfish. It only moved its head to one of its corners, while the other 4 corners replaced its arms and legs. Apart from that, this starfish's mouth remained in the middle of its body. It had a feeding organ similar to that of an ordinary starfish. When it opened its mouth, other than rows of sharp teeth, it also evolved a red tongue that could extend for at least 100 meters. Lin Yuan had secretly seen this starfish demonic beast hunting other prisoners. Almost all of the prisoners were ambushed by the red tongue before being sucked into the starfish demonic beast's mouth. Their bodies were then ground into pieces and devoured by the starfish demonic beast's teeth. It could be considered one of its trump cards. However, this starfish demonic beast was obviously very intelligent. When other demonic beasts were watching, it would never reveal the existence of its red tongue. It was just that the undersea prison's range of activity was too large. It naturally wouldn't be difficult for it to find some unnoticed corners to hunt. It was unknown whether it was because of the warden's intervention or because the prisoners weren't willing to stay with a freak like Lin Yuan, but there were no other demonic beasts around. In other words, if this starfish demonic beast wanted to attack, it would go all out. As such, he had to be wary of its red tongue, which could easily restrain Class 8 and 9 demonic beasts at the Mountain Lord realm. If it was its original body, the starfish demonic beast's teeth definitely wouldn't be able to bite through his scales. However, it was a different story for the puppet body. The puppet's defensive strength was indeed strong when it was forged from various precious metals and its scales. However, that was only in the past. If it were to replace its scales with its current ones, the defensive strength of the puppet body would definitely increase by 2 to 3 levels. Even if Zhao Xiang used his full strength to execute Calm Wind Ripple, he wouldn't be able to leave a single dent on the puppet's body. The scales of a Class 1 Mountain Lord mixed with metals might not necessarily be able to withstand the starfish demonic beast's bite. In addition, although this puppet body had the ability to repair cracks and dents, if a large piece of skin or flesh was torn off, it would require sufficient materials to repair it. After all, the characteristics of memory metals were only able to restore the original shape, not regenerating something out of nothing. Nothing, I just want to kill you. The starfish demonic beast's facial features wore a smile. It demonic beast's demonic beast. It was demonic beast's head? It demonic beast's demonic beast turned to Lin Yuan's in the time it took a breath to him. This speed had already broken through the sound barrier, but strangely, there were no sonic booms. God! The starfish demonic beast was slightly shocked, and a hint of surprise appeared in its eyes. There was no sense of weightlessness when it hit a shadow, nor was there any pain when it hit the wall. Therefore, it did hit Lin Yuan. However, there was no sound of bones breaking or blood flowing. Lin Yuan didn't even retreat. Instead, he stood in place and caught the starfish demonic beast. Do you want to eat me? Lin Yuan maintained his posture of turning his head. His body didn't move at all. The undersea prison was different from the prison in Lin Yuan's previous life. There was no so-called reform through labor here, and fighting was not prohibited. Except for special existences like Lin Yuan, who was specially protected by the Dragon Palace, prisoners were even allowed to kill each other. Devouring a demonic beast whose strength was similar to theirs was more exciting than hunting those weaker demonic beasts or wild beasts. After all, such prey could bring them greater benefits, whether it was a life-and-death battle or the flesh and blood of high-level demonic beasts. If not for the restriction of freedom in this prison, it wouldn't be so easy to get them outside. According to Lin Yuan's knowledge, there were 10 existences in the early stage of the desolate demon realm in this undersea prison. 8 of them were demonic beasts in the Mountain Lord realm when they entered. They grew to their current level by devouring other prisoners. However, these 8 demonic beasts in the desolate demon realm didn't attack the demonic beasts in the Mountain Lord realm. Their strength was similar to each other. Even if they really fought to the death, other demonic beasts could easily take advantage of them. Therefore, they maintained a relatively peaceful relationship. The warden didn't care about them. The starfish demonic beast was considered a rising star in the undersea prison. It also grew by devouring other prisoners. In a situation where both sides didn't mention their intentions, it was reasonable to say that they wanted to hunt Lin Yuan. The starfish demonic beast's face darkened. Before it could say anything, it suddenly felt a strong wind coming from behind. Although it reacted immediately, it still felt a burning pain on its back. It had obviously been cut open by a sharp weapon. However, it wasn't a big problem. Creatures like the starfish didn't have many internal organs. After becoming a demonic beast, they didn't have many vital points. Moreover, the starfish had an extremely strong recovery ability. Coupled with the recovery ability of demonic beasts, the wound on its back could be healed in the blink of an eye. It wouldn't cause too much of a problem. After being hit by this blade, the starfish demonic beast was even more shocked. Sneak attack? How was this possible? It had received the warden's order to attack Lin Yuan. It was said that it was incited by the Western Sea Dragon Palace. In other words, the warden of this undersea prison would definitely not help Lin Yuan. In addition, Lin Yuan had been acting alone for a short period of time. Let alone friends, he didn't even have a nodding acquaintance. Who would help Lin Yuan at this time? If you want to attack me, you'll have to ask it first. Lin Yuan didn't take the opportunity to attack the starfish demonic beast. Instead, he pointed behind the starfish demonic beast with his mouth. The starfish demonic beast was quite vigilant and kept a distance from Lin Yuan. Only then did it turn its head to see who had attacked it. It had a black crab head. Under its abdomen was a body similar to that of a human. It also had pitch black skin. In its hand, there was a long knife that was completely black from the handle to the blade. There was a white line on the tip of the knife that was drifting with the seawater. Obviously, this crab was the existence that had attacked it. But, where did this crab come from? As a troublemaker that relied on hunting other prisoners to strengthen itself, the starfish demonic beast had done a detailed investigation of the prisoners in the prison. Its purpose was to distinguish which ones it couldn't provoke and which ones it could eat. However, it couldn't remember the identity of this crab no matter how hard it tried. The nearest prisoners were only Lin Yuan and a few species of the Dragon Palace. It wasn't that there weren't any crabs, but a pitch-black crab was a rare existence in the entire endless sea. If it had seen it, it would have an impression of it. Chapter 660. The crab was naturally General Crab, who had been guarding the West Sea Dragon Palace. As he had attacked Lin Yuan, he had been swallowed by the Netherworld realm black water released by Lin Yuan and became one of Lin Yuan's prisoners. If he wanted to be released, he could only work for Lin Yuan. The Crab General was also a mountain lord, but he was only at level 4, which was 5 levels lower than the starfish demonic beast. However, it did not matter. As a creature of the underworld river, although its strength had not increased, it had obtained eternal life. Even if it was torn apart or crushed, it could turn into the black water of the underworld river and reform its body. In this world, except for Lin Yuan, nothing could kill it. The only disadvantage of Netherworld realm creatures was that they could only exist in the Netherworld realm black water. They could only leave the Netherworld realm black water for about 500 meters before dispersing and fusing back into the Netherworld realm black water. Unless Lin Yuan released a large amount of Netherworld realm black water, they could only move within 500 meters of Lin Yuan. This distance wouldn't increase because of Lin Yuan's Netherworld realm black water, as this was a characteristic of Netherworld river creatures. However, if Lin Yuan could fill the entire world with Netherworld realm black water, why would he need a 500-meter movement restriction? General Crab took a few steps forward without a word and stood between Lin Yuan and the starfish. He raised the black saber in his hand and stared coldly at the starfish. But the starfish monster beast could clearly sense that the crab general was staring at it with a terrifying look in its eyes. It wasn't a cold killing intent, but a greedy look, as if it were some incredible treasure and not a powerful monster beast. Lin Yuan, who was standing at the side, was telepathically connected with the Netherworld river creature he had released. He could sense General Crab's greed for the starfish almost every second. It wasn't that he coveted the starfish's body. Instead, Netherworld river creatures were immersed in the Netherworld river day and night. If they didn't enter the cycle of reincarnation, they wouldn't be released. The long years would drive them crazy, and their immortality would cause them to lose their fear. At the same time, they would lose all other emotions, leaving only numbness. Although they still had intelligence and could communicate, they would never try to communicate with a Netherworld river creature. This was because there was only one thing in this world that could make them feel happy. For this precious emotion, they were willing to give up everything. That matter was to drag other things into the Nether River as well. No matter if it was a living creature or a dead soul, they were all their prey. Sure. After killing it, drag it into the Nether River. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and replied to Crab General in his heart. From the very beginning, this battle was not on equal footing. Even though the sea star monster beast was 4 levels higher than the Crab General was an existence that could never be killed. In this sealed environment, even escaping was an extravagant hope. Thus, the sea star monster beast could only keep fighting until it completely lost the ability to resist. Then, it was dragged into the river Styx by the Crab General. Lin Yuan's interpersonal relationships were actually suitable for it. As a hunter that hunted other prisoners, those weaker than it would avoid it, and those stronger than it would disdain to befriend it. Even if it wanted to find a demonic beast that was willing to help it block the Crab General and buy some time for it to breathe, it wouldn't even be able to find one. Forget it. I don't care if you have a helper or not. Kneel down and talk to me. The sea star monster beast shook its head and looked gloomily at the approaching Crab General and the indifferent Lin Yuan as it growled. As its voice fell, the sea star monster beast struck first. Its hands were like heavy hammers as it smashed down. After all, as a prisoner, it wasn't allowed to carry weapons. However, as a member of the demonic beast race, it didn't particularly need weapons or armor. The black blade in the Crab General's hand was a prohibited item here, but it didn't necessarily pose much of a threat. That blade wasn't even as painful as being hammered by a demonic beast of the same level. Bang! With just one hammer, black water splashed everywhere. The Crab General, who had only injured the sea star monster beast with a sneak attack, was instantly torn apart. The difference in strength between the two was obvious. Bah! You're only a so-so. The sea star monster beast, who had killed the Crab General in one move, spat to the side and once again walked towards Lin Yuan. Just as it lifted its right foot, it felt a gust of wind behind it again. Without much time to think, the sea star monster beast suddenly turned around and kicked the attacker behind it. Although its speed was very fast, the other party had made the first move. Therefore, although its kick scattered the other party, its face was also hit by the other party's blade. However, just like before, the shock in its heart was far greater than the pain in its body. The Crab General, who had been smashed to pieces by its fist, had actually attacked it with a blade. It had been smashed to the point of sputtering in all directions, but it could still gather back together and become its original form? What kind of freak was this? After dealing with the crab general once again, the wounds on the sea star monster beast's face were slowly healing. However, this time, it didn't abandon the crab general and walk towards Lin Yuan. After all, the crab general had been torn apart like this before, but in the blink of an eye, it had recovered. This kind of regenerative ability was even more terrifying than the sea star monster beast. How terrifying was the regenerative ability of the sea star monster beast? Let's take an example from Lin Yuan's previous life that had been proven. If the 5 horns of a sea star were cut off, the sea star wouldn't die. Instead, it would slowly heal. Not only could the original sea star recover, even the 5 horns that were cut off could grow back into 5 new sea stars. The sea star monster beast, which had a powerful regenerative ability, dared to say that it wouldn't die after being smashed into pieces. However, it didn't dare to say that it could recover to its original form in the blink of an eye. What the hell are you? The sea star monster beast's expression was extremely cold. It stared with fear at the black liquid that was squirming and gathering once again, weaving the crab general's body once again. It couldn't help but ask in fear. The crab general didn't respond to the sea star monster beast. Instead, it dragged the black blade that had been woven again and walked towards the sea star monster beast. Although the Netherworld River creatures had their own bodies and memories, they were essentially a part of the Netherworld River. They were just a handful of water in the Netherworld River. Therefore, they didn't lose their emotions. Instead, as a derivative, they could only empathize with the Netherworld River. Even the joy they felt when they dragged their prey into the Netherworld River was only because the Netherworld River was happy that it had grown again. Although the crab general had just become a Netherworld River creature, its emotions had long been obliterated. Apart from its memories and appearance, it was a completely new creature. Naturally, it wouldn't speak to the sea star monster beast. Have you ever seen a normal person talking to a piece of meat on their plate? The sea star monster beast was now equivalent to a dish in the Netherworld River that Lin Yuan controlled. Chapter 661. The sea star monster beast and the crab general were locked in a fierce battle. From the beginning, the sea star monster beast killed the crab general in 1 move, to 2 moves, 3 moves. The sea star monster beast was getting weaker and weaker, but the crab general's regenerative ability did not show any signs of weakening. Although the black water splashed everywhere every time it was hammered, a new crab general would appear in the blink of an eye and attack the sea star monster beast. If not for the crab general's ability to injure it, the sea star monster beast would have thought that everything in front of it was an illusion. Everything in the world had a price. A powerful strike from a cultivator required the support of a large amount of Zhen-Qi. A monster beast needed a large amount of stamina to run through the forest, and the same was true for regenerative abilities. Every regenerative ability required a large amount of energy. No energy was infinite. Even the sun would eventually be extinguished one day. As the energy in the body was greatly consumed, the regenerative ability would gradually weaken. Just like the sea star monster beast, it could heal the wounds on its body in the blink of an eye, but now, it could take 4 or 5 breaths to heal. Wounds were considered normal because its body did not have much Zhen-Qi left. But the crab general clearly violated this law. The starfish demonic beast couldn't even remember how many times it had hammered the crab general to death. However, the crab general had died at least 200 to 300 times in this battle. Yet, its regenerative ability hadn't decreased in the slightest. This was a regenerative ability that even the sea star monster beast would be envious of. At the same time, it was a regenerative ability that should never appear. In the end, the sea star monster beast was still nailed to the ground by the crab general. This kind of injury was not fatal to it, but it could be firmly fixed in place for a short period of time. This was because it did not even have the strength to stand up, let alone use its muscles to repel the black blade. Right now, even raising its hand was an extravagant hope. The crab general approached the starfish demonic beast step by step, and then his figure collapsed and turned into a black water surging on the ground. In an instant, the black water covered the starfish demonic beast lying on the ground. Accompanied by a teeth-numbing friction sound, the black water regathered into a ball, and its size more than doubled. Then, Lin Yuan raised his hand and held it down, and it slowly disappeared into Lin Yuan's right hand. The sea star monster beast lying on the ground also completely disappeared. There was a sticky white liquid all around it. This was the blood of the sea star. It seemed that only this liquid could prove that the sea star monster beast had been here. Meanwhile, the warden, who was watching Lin Yuan from afar, crossed his arms in front of his chest and turned to look at the dark purple-skinned fish head beside him. Did you see it clearly? Can you be sure that the crab demon that suddenly appeared and disappeared is really that person's son? The fish-headed man nodded with a serious expression, and said, I did. Its facial features, body shape, and weapon are all the same. However, that person is from the red crab race, so its skin can't be black. I feel like the change in its skin color is most likely the key to how Black Jiao can control it. Then it's possible that it's not. Let's observe for a while longer. Don't tell that person yet. If it knew that its favorite son was being controlled by Black Jiao, no one would be able to stop it. It would definitely come over and tear Lin Yuan apart. At the mention of that person, the warden's burly body trembled slightly, as if he was extremely afraid. The fish head nodded and said in a deep voice, if he really is that person's son, then there's a big problem. As his voice fell, the warden and the fish-headed man both fell silent. Although they didn't know whether the crab general was dead or alive, from the battle between the sea star monster beast and the crab general, it was unlikely that the crab general was alive. That person's favorite son was currently missing. If it was confirmed that he was dead and was being controlled by Black Jiao, then even if he died, he would have to continuously revive to fight for the Black Jiao. Once this was reported to the Dragon Palace, that person would probably explode. When that happened, even the higher-ups of the West Sea Dragon Palace might not be able to protect the Black Jiao. Lin Yuan, who had turned and walked back to his cell, had naturally noticed the warden and the fish-headed man spying on him. When he opened his eye of God, he was also eavesdropping on their conversation. When they fell silent, Lin Yuan curled his lips, and a hint of shock flashed through his eyes. When he made his move earlier, he had already noticed that the crab general had a dragon bloodline in his body. However, Lin Yuan didn't think much of it, because there were simply too many dragon bloodlines in this sea region. For a race like the dragon race that didn't have reproductive isolation and could reproduce with anything, let alone a crab, even if they gave birth to a monster like the one in the Cthulhu divine system, Lin Yuan wouldn't be surprised. However, from the looks of it now, that didn't seem to be the case. This crab general's parents seemed to have an extremely powerful and protective existence. Outside the Crystal Palace, he had made the crab general disappear without a trace in front of everyone. This definitely couldn't be blamed. However, the West Sea Dragon Palace's description of the crab general's parents should still be missing and not dead, which temporarily calmed them down. However, judging from their conversation now, once they learned of the crab general's death, they would definitely chase him to the underwater prison and tear him apart alive. This is very interesting. The corners of Lin Yuan's mouth split into two sides as his pitch-black eyes flashed. If he leaked any valuable information to the West Sea Dragon Palace, the West Sea Dragon Palace would think of a way to protect him. At this moment, if the crab general were to cause any trouble, it was very likely that it would attract the attention of the crab general's parents. When the time came, both sides would directly fight if they disagreed, and the underwater prison would definitely be breached. When that happened, the prisoners would have to fight if they wanted to obtain freedom. Perhaps he could escape in the chaos? Although it was very dangerous. However, Lin Yuan, who didn't have the ancient Fey court backing him, could only make such a choice. The West Sea Dragon Palace couldn't obtain any benefits from him, so they definitely wouldn't let him leave. If he wanted freedom, this was probably the only way. As for how the crab general's situation would be leaked, that would depend on whether the other group of demonic beasts that were monitoring him could understand the meaning of his subsequent actions. The West Sea Dragon Palace might help him conceal the crab general's situation and appease the crab general's parents, but the evil dragon side clearly wouldn't cooperate with the West Sea Dragon Palace's intentions. The earliest evil dragons to escape from the underwater prison might have been the batch that was nailed to the bottom of the sea by the metal pillars. They were able to escape after becoming strong, but as the underwater prison system became more and more perfect, it was clearly impossible for them to escape. This was because leaving the evil dragon to die in the sea was different from sending experts to watch over this batch of evil dragons. The difficulty of escaping was also completely different. Therefore, the evil dragons that had escaped from the underwater prison over the years were definitely not existences that had no one to rely on. The identity of the other group of demon beasts monitoring it was naturally obvious. Chapter 662. In the next half a month, Lin Yuan was unusually active in the underwater prison. Originally, Lin Yuan was like a robot without any desires. He acted according to the schedule of the underwater prison every day. If it was not necessary, he would not even open his mouth. It was because of this attitude that the West Sea Dragon Palace was unusually dissatisfied with Lin Yuan. They found the starfish demon beast to attack Lin Yuan. According to the original plan, once the starfish demon beast succeeded, this was just the beginning. There were countless prisoners in the underwater prison. Most of them did not have the kind of crimes that would lead to imprisonment for life. Therefore, if they could choose to cooperate with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas to reduce their sentences, many demon beasts were willing to serve. When the time came, all the prisoners in the underwater prison would ostracize Lin Yuan. No matter how legendary the Black Jiao's experience was, it would not be easy for him to live in such a difficult situation. He could only obediently cooperate with the West Sea Dragon Palace in exchange for being released from prison. Unfortunately, the West Sea Dragon Palace's wishful thinking was good. They did not expect that not only did the starfish demon beast fail, but even Lin Yuan's behavior and habits had changed greatly. During this period, Lin Yuan could be said to be running amok. No matter what kind of prisoner it was, as long as they met Lin Yuan's eyes, they would at least be beaten up. As for the demon beasts that Lin Yuan disliked, they were even more miserable. They would usually be beaten up by the underworld river creatures. When they completely lost the ability to resist, they would be transformed into underworld river creatures by Lin Yuan and become one of Lin Yuan's lackeys. Once Lin Yuan made a move, there was an 80% chance that he would kill. However, the warden did not dare to interfere at all. This was because several wardens did not gain any advantage from the underworld river creatures. If it were not for their desolate demon realm cultivation, these wardens would not have been able to escape. Now, there were more and more underworld river creatures around Lin Yuan. Under the situation where the demon beasts above the desolate demon realm didn't make a move, he was a tyrant in the prison. Regarding this, the warden had thought of many countermeasures. However, since the upper echelons of the West Sea Dragon Palace were certain that Lin Yuan had a powerful protector who could even threaten the Dragon King, they gave up on all plans that might harm Lin Yuan. They could only try their best to reduce the time they spent freely and constantly reduce the range of their activities. It even wanted to transfer all the other prisoners in this prison to other prisons and use this place as a prison to detain Lin Yuan alone. However, it was obvious that this idea was not realistic. This was because the construction of every underwater prison was not cheap. For example, this one was made of materials that could withstand a full-force attack from a demon beast in the middle stage of the desolate demon realm without leaving a trace. If it was used in military equipment, it could create a ground force with a defense that was even more terrifying than the divine martial heavy steps. Although the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was rich, it was impossible for them to spend too many resources on a group of prisoners. Therefore, there were not many underwater prisons that could be put into use. This was especially true for demon beasts from the Mountain Lord realm to the desolate demon realm. They were the mainstream in the endless sea. All the prisons in this layer of the sea were full. The higher layer could not hold these prisoners, and the lower layer could not withstand the water pressure. The warden looked at the surveillance projection on the crystal in front of him. There was even a layer of gloomy black covering the shark's head. He gritted his teeth as he watched Lin Yuan command those unkillable pitch-black monsters to attack the other demon beasts. His eyes were red as he roared, "This bastard, what is he trying to do?" The warden of an underwater prison was not a small role in the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. If there was no existence from the Dragon Palace, the warden would be the supreme king of the prison. Whether it was prisoners or jailers, the warden could decide their life and death with a single word. However, since Lin Yuan was detained in this prison, especially after the attack of the starfish demon beast, the warden began to gradually feel that this prison seemed to be out of his control. The guards from the Dragon Palace of the West Sea were unwilling to deal with Lin Yuan. At the same time, they did not allow the warden to deal with Lin Yuan. This also led to the prisoners and jailers in the underwater prison to fear Lin Yuan far more than the warden. If this continued, even if Lin Yuan was willing to cooperate with the Dragon Palace of the West Sea, the warden would be pushed to the bottom, and his future would be bleak. In addition to the warden, there was another group of demon beasts, and their faces were extremely ugly. Since Lin Yuan began to attack the other demon beasts, they seemed to be in a state of being ignored by Lin Yuan. Even if they took the initiative to attack those pitch-black monsters, they could not attract any hatred. After those monsters reformed their bodies, they only glanced at them and once again pounced on the targets they had chosen before. Now, the free time after lunch every day had become a game of survival. The warden and the jailers were bystanders. They were the bystanders. Lin Yuan and those pitch-black monsters were the hunters, and the other demon beasts were the prey under Lin Yuan's fangs. At first, the warden wanted to cancel the free time program. However, it was obvious that this method could not stop those pitch-black monsters that could dissolve into black liquid. Imprisoning all the prisoners in the cells would only make them die more miserably. After dozens of prisoners died, the warden finally compromised. He restored the free time after lunch, and it evolved into a game of survival without any resistance. These prisoners had to endure the attacks of the pitch-black monsters for about 2 hours before ending their free time and returning to their cells to rest. Lin Yuan would also abide by the rules and not attack them. In the beginning, when there were many demon beasts, it was fine. However, now there were fewer and fewer demon beasts alive. No matter how hard they tried, the warden would notice that there was a group of monsters in this prison that were ignored by the pitch-black monster. Then, the warden would deduce their identities. Would they still have a chance to live after this? The leader of this group of demon beasts gritted his teeth and reached out to push away the 2 demon beasts beside him. He strode towards Lin Yuan, who was wearing a blue robe and half lying on a rocking chair and napping. He gritted his teeth and said, "Black Jiao, we don't seem to have offended you, right? Why are you doing this to us?" Lin Yuan took off a scroll covering his face and said expressionlessly, "I didn't even attack you. Isn't that showing you kindness? Why, do you have to let me kill a few of you to make you feel better?" The leader was silent for a moment. He gritted his teeth and said, "If you had done it earlier, I could have been comfortable for a few days. Now, those demon beasts without any background are almost dead. What's the use of killing them?" Chapter 663. Since you know it's useless, why are you still talking nonsense? Lin Yuan glanced at the leader and pretended to cover his face with the scroll again. The leader gnashed his teeth in hatred. They belonged to the evil dragon camp and had been opposing the West Sea Dragon Palace for thousands of years. Over the years, they were involved in almost all the escapees from the underwater prison. The leader's job was to stay in the prison for a long time and observe the escapees who might join the evil dragon camp. Then, he would rescue them from the inside and strengthen his camp. For thousands of years, such an existence has eliminated countless spies from the West Sea Dragon Palace for the organization. The West Sea Dragon Palace couldn't even figure out why the people they arranged were discovered until now. Their existence was actively exposed by Lin Yuan. No matter how stupid the higher-ups of the West Sea Dragon Palace were, they should have realized that there were ghosts in every underwater prison. Later, there would be a purge and investigation. It was hard to say what would happen to the other prisons, but they would definitely be wiped out in this prison. If by any chance that blind thing under his command was coerced and tempted to confess everything about the organization, the entire organization would face a disaster. Therefore, there were only 2 paths in front of him. First, he could start with the leader and let all the members commit suicide. Then, there wouldn't be a problem of leaking the secret. Second, he could think of a way to break into this prison and rescue all the demonic beasts. At the same time, he could start a full-scale war and trigger the war that both sides had been preparing for countless years. What do you want? The leader grabbed Lin Yuan's left hand. A cold glint flashed across his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Black Jiao, I admit that although we've been observing your every move, we don't mean any harm. I even want to release you. Even if you don't join us, we won't let the West Sea Dragon Palace, who cheated you, have an easy time after you leave. In this way, our goal will be achieved." If it was possible, no one wanted to die. But in fact, the evil dragon camp wasn't powerful enough to break into the underwater prison. Otherwise, why would they need to recruit members in such an inefficient way? Spread the news of this place. Naturally, someone will come to break the prison. The leader's strength wasn't weak. Even a desolate demon realm early-stage desolate demon realm cultivator might not be able to break free. But it just so happened that it was up against Lin Yuan's puppet body, an existence that had terrifying defensive capabilities but no sensory nerves. The leader's strength was not enough to remove his entire arm, and Lin Yuan could not feel the pain caused by the pressure. Under the suppression of the leader's strength, Lin Yuan covered his face with the scroll again and said indifferently, "Remember, you have to emphasize that the parents of the first crab general that I summoned might not be of the same mind as the Dragon Palace. If they knew that their beloved youngest son had turned into a monster that could not die even if he wanted to, what would happen?" Lin Yuan's voice was very calm, but the leader couldn't help but shiver. "I understand." Suppressing the discomfort in his heart, the leader could only brace himself and nod. The West Sea Dragon Palace seemed to have a strong ruling power over the Endless Sea, but in fact, it wasn't so. Not to mention the Outer Sea demonic beasts, even within the West Sea Dragon Palace's sphere of influence, not all dragon blood demonic beasts were of the same mind as the Dragon Palace. Among them, there were many powerful demonic beasts that were currently in the state of feudal lords. They obeyed the orders of the West Sea Dragon Palace but didn't listen to the orders of the West Sea Dragon Palace. There were even some monstrous existences that had already placed themselves in the same position as the Dragon Palace. They thought that both sides were in a cooperative relationship and not superior. But the West Sea Dragon Palace was helpless against them. It wasn't because these demonic beasts were so powerful that even the West Sea Dragon Palace was afraid of them. It was because the demonic beasts in the Outer Sea were getting restless, and more evil dragons were escaping from the underwater prison. The situation was like an egg in a precarious egg. The West Sea Dragon Palace still had to cooperate with the other 3 dragon palaces in their crazy plan to invade the Tianwu continent, so they didn't have much combat power at hand. They could only listen to these demonic beasts. If the crab general's parents were really such existences, perhaps the organization only needed to add fuel to the fire, and they would be able to easily invade this place. If you know, then do it. Don't disturb my rest, unless you want to join me." Lin Yuan tilted his head and said coldly through the scroll. Although he couldn't see Lin Yuan's face, the leader felt a chill run down his spine the moment he heard Lin Yuan's words. It was as if he was a weakling who accidentally entered a forest filled with ferocious beasts and was targeted by the strongest predator. Through the eye of God, Lin Yuan watched the leader retreat pathetically. The corner of his mouth that was hidden under the scroll curled up into a cold smile. The combination of the 2 passive skills, Tyrant Song of the World and Dragon's Might, was still quite useful. Although he couldn't use it against existences like the bartender and the dragonoid whose realm and bloodline were above his, it was more than enough to deal with these demonic beasts who were about the same level as him. Although the leader's appearance couldn't be seen, the dragon bloodline in his body was definitely of a higher level than the flood dragon. So stupid. Lin Yuan muttered again, but he didn't know who he was talking about. On the other side. Looking at the leader who was talking to Lin Yuan, the head warden's face turned even uglier. If it wasn't for Lin Yuan's crazy behavior, he wouldn't even have noticed the existence of a third party in this prison. Moreover, this so-called third party was no weakling. Out of the 10 initial stage Desolate Demon Realm prisoners, 3 of them were from this group of forces that weren't attacked by the black monsters. In addition to the other miscellaneous members, if they wanted to start a riot and break out of the prison, unless he, the head warden, personally stepped in, the prison guards might not be able to stop them. They seem to have made some kind of deal. Beside the head warden, the fish-headed man said with a serious expression, Black Jiao's face is covered with a scroll. I don't know what it is, but it can actually block my detection. That's why I didn't hear what the Black Jiao said after that. However, I can be sure that this group of demonic beasts is from some organization. Just like us, they have been observing the Black Jiao and seem to be planning to secretly release the Black Jiao. From their tone, it seems that as long as the Black Jiao maintains a hostile relationship with our Dragon Palace, they will be satisfied. They don't need anything else in return. The fact that the fish-headed man could read the prisoner's words through lip-reading was no secret to Lin Yuan. That was why he found a scroll to cover his face. Chapter 664. The warden's breathing paused for a moment before he said coldly, who gave them the guts? To put it bluntly, even though this prison only held mountain lords to the early stage of the Desolate Demon Realm, as a warden, he was definitely one of the strongest wardens even in the lower level of the prison. The prison he was in charge of was the most vicious of all. In other prisons, even though the rules were similar, the prisoners would at most fight with each other. Killing was extremely rare, not to mention hunting other prisoners to strengthen themselves. However, in this prison filled with vicious criminals, it was precisely because of the warden's presence that the prisoners could only hunt other prisoners. They didn't dare to attack the warden at all. Any one of the prisoners who wanted to release Lin Yuan had lived in this prison for at least 3 years. It was impossible that they didn't know the warden's strength. Not to mention, in order to guard Lin Yuan, the Dragon Palace has transferred many masters, both inside and outside the prison, to prepare to catch Lin Yuan, who may escape from prison again. Even though this group of demonic beasts could break the order of the prison, if they really caused a ruckus, they wouldn't even be able to escape unscathed. Where did they get the confidence to release the Black Jiao? Unless, they should have people stationed outside the prison. The fish-headed man's expression became even more serious. He gritted his teeth and said, these guys should be members of that group. When he heard that group, the warden's expression became slightly better, and the blood vessels in his eyes receded. He said in a deep voice, if they want to release Lin Yuan, it will undoubtedly be very troublesome for us. Should we inform the Dragon Palace of the situation here and ask them to send more experts? The fish-headed man shook his head and turned to look at the warden as if he was looking at an idiot. He spat in all directions. It's not like you don't know the situation at the Dragon Palace. I see that your brain is not working well after facing these prisoners every day. Black Jiao is related to the plan of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas to take over the continent. The Dragon Palace can't be too serious about this. I think that the people we have here are all that the Dragon Palace can mobilize. After he finished speaking, the warden and the fish-headed man fell silent. The endless sea was boundless. Even though the Dragon Palace was the ruler in name, there were many individuals and forces in the endless sea that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had to be wary of. Now that the situation was getting more and more tense, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas wouldn't give up on the endless sea if it wasn't for the safety of the land. If that group is really interested in the Black Jiao, at least 3 of the 8 distresses. The warden swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said bitterly, if any of the 8 distresses were to come, the 2 of us might not be able to gain any advantage. If 3 of them were to come, wouldn't we be dead meat? The fish-headed man shook his head, and a light flashed in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, that's impossible. The plan is now at a critical juncture. No matter who it is, they can't interfere with the operation of the Dragon Palace's plan. I heard that all the sea regions in the Endless Sea are targeting that group. Even the 8 distresses have to participate in a battle of this level. Don't forget, they have the 8 distresses, but we still have the 9 sons of Longjiu. It's hard to say who will win. I hope so. The warden nodded lightly, but his face still didn't look too good. They did have a chance of winning, but that was based on the fact that only one of the 8 distresses came. Even if only 2 of them came, they might not be able to hold on until the reinforcements arrived. Moreover, the 8 distresses was just a title. It was just like the 9 sons of Longjiao of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Over the years, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas fought for survival with various forces in the Endless Sea. No one knew how many of the 9 sons of Longjiao had died, but when one died, another would immediately fill the vacancy. The Dragon Palace of the Four Seas didn't only have the 9 sons of Longjiao. Did that group only have 8 distresses? The fish-headed man patted the warden's shoulder and comforted him. I'll get in touch with the Dragon Palace as soon as possible. No matter what, they have to arrange for one of the 9 sons of Longjiao to come over. The warden stayed in the prison all year round and rarely communicated with the outside world. He only knew that the environment was bad, but he didn't know how bad it was outside. Therefore, he couldn't understand how important the Black Jiao was to the Dragon Palace of the West Sea. If it weren't for the fact that the frontline couldn't transfer manpower, existences like the warden would be insignificant in the lineup guarding the Black Jiao. Now that there was a big mess, let alone one of the 9 sons of Longjiao, as long as there were people from the frontline, it was possible that all of the 9 sons of Longjiao would come. At the same time, Lin Yuan, who had already returned to his cell, lowered his head and smiled faintly. It seemed that the evil dragons who were monitoring him had a bigger background than he had imagined. Just a slight suspicion was enough to make the warden react as if he was facing a great enemy. This also meant that the force behind them was enough to compete with the Dragon Palace of the West Sea. This was good too. With double protection, even if the plan went wrong, it wouldn't fail. But what were the so-called 8 distresses? He had heard of the 9 sons of Longjiao. It was said that the 9 sons of Longjiao were all different. Each of the 9 sons of Longjiao was extraordinary, and any one of them was a well-known totem in his previous life. Compared to most of the members of the dragon clan who could only be described as dragon, they were obviously much more powerful. The Endless Sea seemed to be unveiling its mysterious veil bit by bit. It was like Lin Yuan was showing a world of intersecting fangs and dripping with blood. The Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had ruled the Endless Sea for countless years. Although they didn't coexist in harmony with the humans, most of the time, there wouldn't be any violent conflicts. Both sides had a little enmity, but they were used to ignoring each other. However, the precondition for all of this was that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas ruled the Endless Sea. Both sides had their own territories and could mind their own business. Once the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas left the Endless Sea for the mainland, the humans wouldn't look on coldly. Whether it was to protect their own territories or to seek revenge, they wouldn't sit back and watch the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas take root in the Tianwu continent. After all, these demonic beasts in the sea were much more terrifying than the demonic beasts on the mainland that had been imprisoned for many years. A slight negligence could breed a terrifying existence that was even more uncontrollable than the northern frontier. At least the northern frontier still had space for humans to live, right? Chapter 665. In a barren sea area 150,000 miles away from the underwater prison. A bald, boorish man, who was about 2 meters tall and dressed in green monk robes, threw away the flesh in his hand. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and waved his hand, placing a milky white mirror of energy in front of him. He smiled and said, "Boss, why are you looking for me today?" On the other side of the mirror was a young man wearing a white robe. His face was so pale that it was comparable to the body of a puppet before it was modified. The young man looked at the several hundred meters long monster behind the bald man. It was only a corner of the monster that had been gnawed to the bones. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and he said with a helpless face, "When can you get rid of the bad habit of eating raw food? How many times have I said, you are my most perfect work? You should be the highest creature in this world." Bang! 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 There was a sound of a table being smashed from the other side of the mirror. Immediately after, the young man screamed madly, "But what are you doing? You hide in the Endless Sea all day long. If you don't fight with those guys who like to turn other creatures into freaks and lunatics, you eat all kinds of sea demon beasts. Can't you act like a high-level creature? The bald man reached out and touched his bald head with a smile, listening to the complaints of the sick young man without saying a word. After a full 5 breaths, the young man seemed to remember the business and said with a blank expression, "By the way, you go back to the underwater prison, number X13-102. There is a humanoid creature in there. Its body is a black jiao. Bring him out alive for me. My boss gave me a task before, but I was busy doing experiments and forgot about it. I just remembered this matter." Huh? The bald man was slightly startled. Apparently, he didn't expect the task given by the young man. The bald man didn't move immediately. Instead, he thought for a moment and asked in a muffled voice, "Boss, what is the relationship between you and this guy?" Colleague." The young man was obviously stumped by the boorish man's question. After muttering to himself for a moment, he hesitantly said a sentence. However, it seemed that even he himself was not sure whether this was the case or not. However, very quickly, his expression completely changed. He once again roared crazily, "Tao Tai, you better put away your little thoughts. Absolutely. Absolutely do not treat him as food. Otherwise, my boss's anger is not something that you and I can bear." Tao Tai curled his lips and did not respond. "I'm not joking with you. It's true that I can't descend to the world you're in, but that's because an incomplete world can't bear my power. At the same time, that world is one of the battlefields and rejects outsiders. If it weren't for the fact that you were born not long ago and the possibility of being absorbed as a native, the will of that world would have obliterated you long ago. However, even if I can't descend to that world, it doesn't mean that I can't punish you. Don't forget that your origin is still with me. I can interrupt the connection of your consciousness at any time and turn your physical body in that world into a dead object. Then, I'll stuff your defenseless origin into the freezer and seal it for a few eras. Believe me, such a thing is not difficult for me to do. Before you, hundreds of experimental subjects have made the same mistake as you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be your turn to be born. Do you understand?" The young man sat on a sofa and slowly crossed his legs. With a playful expression, he said, "Of course, you can play some little tricks. For example, you can leave a wisp of divine sense in this body to form a new life form so that you can completely get rid of my control. Didn't you desperately devour the biological genes that are useful to you just to do this?" As soon as his voice fell, the brute's expression changed. Obviously, he did not expect that his immediate superior would know all of his little tricks. "From my point of view, your creation is perfect because you've evolved your own thoughts and no longer need me to give you orders to do things. However, from my boss' point of view, you're just a rather inferior tool. If he wants to, there are countless ways to easily destroy you. Including me, there's no existence that can protect you. That's it. I still have experiments to do. As for my orders, you can choose not to execute them. You can also go against them in public but in private, but I promise that as long as you try to make a move on that black jiao, you'll regret it." The young man crossed his legs and the playful expression on his face became even more obvious. This call was one-sided from the beginning. After the young man finished his request and warning, he hung up the call. The milky white mirror cracked and exploded in an instant before completely dissipating into nothingness. Tao Tai stopped wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. A long snake forked in the middle stretched out and easily licked the blood on his hands and face clean. It seemed that the bloody scene just now was purely used by him to disgust his boss. After standing in place and thinking for a moment, Tao Tai's figure moved. The surroundings instantly exploded, and the body of the huge monster behind him was also directly torn apart. It was not until it was completely crushed into powder that Tao Tai's figure disappeared from the place. Half an hour later, the warden suddenly woke up and bounced up from the chair with sweat all over his face. The fish-headed man who was guarding at the side cast an inquiring look at the warden curiously, but his face was unusually gloomy. The warden had a special ability. which was similar to the divination in the legends. He could peek into a corner of the future through dreams, but it was not accurate because the future he dreamed of could be changed. It belonged to the flow of the long river of time, and almost all of them were unimportant pictures. Moreover, the pictures he dreamed of might not be related to what he wanted to know. It could be just some trivial things, or it could be a future that could not be changed. If it were not for the fact that this ability to foresee the future could not be controlled or guided, and could only peek into a corner of the future through sleep, the warden would definitely not be sitting in this position now. He would have long been worshipped as a treasure by the dragon palace of the four seas. My dream changed. The warden swallowed and said with a trembling voice. Including the fish-headed man, the expressions of all the powerhouses from the dragon palace of the West Sea in the room changed slightly. Since the warden's dream was a corner of the future, it could not be changed without reason. If it really happened, it proved that an extremely powerful external force was involved in this matter, which caused the future to change. Old Purple, one of the 9 sons of the dragon you invited is Chonyo? The warden reached out and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, but his body was still trembling. Obviously, the things he saw in the dream were too unforgettable. Chapter 666. This time, the fish head's expression changed. It was the one with the highest level among this group of demon beasts. In terms of strength, it might not be the strongest, but in terms of status, it was definitely the big brother. This was because its father was a person with real power in the West Sea Dragon Palace. Even within the West Sea Dragon Palace's control, there was a large area of the sea as its territory. Although it was not the Dragon King in name, in its father's territory, its father was the real Dragon King. The task of contacting the West Sea Dragon Palace naturally fell to it. When the West Sea Dragon Palace heard that the evil dragons had their eyes on the Black Jiao, they immediately said that they would send reinforcements as soon as possible. Before the other conditions were met, the leader of the 9 sons of the Dragon Palace, Chonyo, who was recuperating, would arrive at the underwater prison first to cooperate with them. However, the West Sea Dragon Palace only said that they would send one of the 9 sons of the Dragon Palace over. They did not specify which one. After the warden entered the dream, the West Sea Dragon Palace contacted the fish head again and confirmed that it was Chonyo. Therefore, the warden's dream this time was indeed a glimpse of the future, and not some random scene that he dreamed of. Seeing the fish head's tacit agreement, the warden's expression became even worse. Gulp. After swallowing a mouthful of saliva, the warden said in a hoarse voice, I dreamed that in 2 minutes, Chonyo would arrive at the prison. Then, Blood Lady would come. Blood Lady wanted to take Lin Yuan away to ask about her son's whereabouts. Chonyo was unwilling, so the two sides fought. Then, there was an unknown existence that entered the battlefield and directly killed Chonyo and Blood Lady. It also ate both of them until nothing was left. At this point, the atmosphere in the room suddenly became tense. No one would have thought that the warden would dream of such a strange scene. The sea demon beasts present were all famous figures in the West Sea Dragon Palace. Naturally, none of them were idiots. Therefore, no one asked the warden what would happen to them. Regardless of whether it was Chonyo or Blood Lady, they were both existences that were far superior to them. However, they were still instantly killed by the unknown intruder. Furthermore, not even a speck of them was left behind. What was the difference between them and cannon fodder? A bunch of cannon fodder. Could they possibly survive? This is impossible. A sea turtle demon beast stood up and shook its head. It sneered and said, I'd rather believe that the dream just now was just an ordinary dream, a pure coincidence. All the demonic beasts turned their gazes towards the sea turtle demonic beast. One had to know that sea turtles were a race with very long lifespans. This longevity was not referring to lifespan or anything like that. After all, who would take lifespans seriously after cultivating? Although it was said to be a lifespan of hundreds or thousands of years, in fact, no real cultivator or demon beast could live that long. Unless they reached the realm of the dragon ancestors, when they were unrivaled in the world, time and lifespan would become their greatest enemy. In fact, 99% of cultivators and demon beasts could only live for 100 years or so. If they didn't die in various accidents, they would die in battle somewhere. There were very few existences that could live to the end of their lives without strength. However, the sea turtle monster beasts were different. Although they couldn't see the future, they had an extremely strong precognition ability. They were especially sensitive to the precognition of danger. Before a crisis arrived, they would take measures such as hiding and escaping. This was also the reason why existences that were good at divination liked to use turtle shells and copper coins to predict good fortune. Don't ask why, just ask about the racial talent. Anyway, I didn't sense any life-threatening danger. Before Chio agreed to come here, there was. However, after the West Sea Dragon Palace contacted us, this sense of danger disappeared. Therefore, I estimate that the people who came to break the prison were at most 1 or 2 8 hardship level cultivators. Let alone killing Chio and Blood Lady at the same time, they might not even be Chio's match in a one-on-one battle. The sea turtle monster beast insisted on its opinion. It seemed to be disdainful of the warden's ability to enter dreams and see the future. The other demonic beasts looked at each other and could only smile bitterly. Although they believed in the warden's dream, they had to stand on the side of the sea turtle monster beast. This was because they were all here on a mission from the West Sea Dragon Palace. Without a suitable reason, they couldn't leave at all. Otherwise, the West Sea Dragon Palace would never let them go. They couldn't tell the higher-ups that the warden had a dream where Chio and Blood Lady were killed and devoured by an intruder, so they ran away in advance, right? If they said that, they might not even have the right to enter the underwater prison. They would be skinned alive. All of them together might not be as important as Chio, let alone Black Jiao, who was highly valued by the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. If anything happened to the two of them, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would definitely be furious. It would be fine if they died here, but if they ran away in advance, it might even endanger the reproduction of the entire clan. 2 minutes wasn't long. However, the group of demonic beasts was gloomy. It was as if every second was a year. Finally, Chio appeared at the place where the demonic beasts gathered in 2 minutes, just as the warden said. This scene made the demonic beasts hold their breaths. To put it bluntly, Chio was only here because of Lin Yuan's importance. When he came and how he came was not something that the demonic beasts had the right to ask. Therefore, when Chio appeared at the same time as the warden's prediction, their faces turned even uglier. Even if it was a coincidence, it couldn't be to this extent, right? Chio was a demonic beast in human form. He looked almost no different from a human. He wore a green robe and his long black hair hung down. It seemed that he was injured, so his face didn't look too good. His lips were also pale. However, his appearance still made the demonic beasts feel extremely oppressed. Why? Did I frighten you? Chio, who knew nothing about what happened before, looked at the demonic beasts with a puzzled face and tilted his head. She's here. The warden, who was hugging his body in the corner, suddenly shivered. He smiled bitterly and said, "The outer array has been touched. Blood Lady has begun to break the restriction and intends to break in." The demonic beasts' faces turned uglier. The second thing had come true. If Chio and Blood Lady had a conflict and fought as predicted, didn't that mean that the terrifying intruder who could kill them in an instant had already arrived near the underwater prison? It seemed that they didn't even have time to run. Blood Lady? What is she doing here? Chio's face darkened. He turned around and walked towards the restriction outside the underwater prison. Chapter 667. Those with great power would naturally have a sense of superiority. They would always stand on the clouds and look down on all living things. As long as they could achieve their goal, they would not care about the life and death of others. Any powerful existence was like this, but some people would hide this sense of superiority in the deepest part of their hearts. For example, Lin Yuan could mingle with any existence without putting on airs. But when facing his subordinates and enemies, as long as there was a need, he could transform into the most ruthless and cold-blooded king, using countless lives to pile up a victory that belonged to him. Those who were full of righteousness were the same. When it was time to act, they would not hesitate. They did not care where they were or how many innocent people around them could not bear the impact of the battle. Anyway, as long as they won, they would be heroes. Those who survived would not dare to say anything about them. Compared to these righteous companions, Lin Yuan was at least less hypocritical. He never flaunted himself as a good person or a moral role model. His existence did bring inconvenience to many people, but it also allowed more people to live a better life. Even if these people who benefited from him were still hostile to him and regarded him as a ferocious and barbaric demon beast, it did not matter. Of course, the world was never just black and white. Other than the righteous companions and Lin Yuan, there was another extreme existence, such as the Dragon Clan. Even if they did not want to make progress, they could still obtain great power through their bloodline. Other than themselves or those who had the ability to wrestle with the Dragon Clan, all living things were just ants in their eyes. They would not even hide their sense of superiority and arrogance. Even though they were all sea demon beasts, they were still divided into two camps by the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. The outer sea demon beasts without the Dragon Clan's bloodline and the Dragon Palace demon beasts with the Dragon Clan's bloodline. If an existence like the Dragon Clan were to correspond to humans, the most typical would be those nobles. The difference in bloodline that they talked about was similar to how the nobles talked about lowly people. In such a group, those with powerful bloodline and strength would become more arrogant. Qiu Niu was a typical example. As one of the main fighting forces of the Dragon Palace, they enjoyed the title of Dragon King. They were one of the true nobles. Other than the dragon ancestors, only the Four Seas Dragon King had the right to order or suppress them. The task of supervising the flood dragon this time had already made him extremely unhappy. After arriving at the underwater prison, those monsters who were supposed to be respectful seemed to have other things to focus on and even ignored his existence. All of the above made Shunyo feel extremely bad at the moment. He even thought about how to teach these disrespectful subordinates of the Dragon Palace a lesson. But he didn't expect that before it could do anything, other demonic beasts would come looking for trouble. At this moment, he finally found a way to vent his anger. The fish-headed man swallowed his saliva, and said tentatively, "Although Old Tortoise doesn't feel threatened, the warden's prophecies have all come true. I think we should give up on comforting ourselves. No matter what, we can't just sit there and wait for death. What do you want to do?" A jellyfish demonic beast shook its crystal-clear head and looked at the fish-headed man with a puzzled expression. The fish-headed man pondered for a moment and said in a deep voice, "The future that the warden dreamed of can be changed. I think that Old Tortoise didn't sense any danger because we can change the future. Another possibility is that the intruder didn't waste any time on us after killing Qiu Niu and Blood Lady, so, how to change the future?" The turtle-type demonic beast's expression changed as it asked in a deep voice. Although it also had the bloodline of the Dragon Clan, the thin bloodline wasn't enough to make it arrogant, especially when it lived near the Dragon Palace. It could easily lose its life if it offended the descendants of some big shot, so it didn't blindly rely on its talent. It preferred to use its brain to avoid possible dangers in advance. Even if the intruder didn't do anything to them, the consequences were not something they could bear. Whether it was the kidnapping of Black Jiao or the death of Qiu Niu and Blood Lady, it was a fatal danger to small fries like them. Especially at this time, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was lacking in manpower and combat power. The death of Qiu Niu was not something that the Dragon Palace could not bear. However, no matter which of the two situations mentioned above was achieved, there was only one outcome for them. They would be sent to the frontline battlefield to fight those disgusting monsters. Not to mention that the battlefield was a place where there was only a slim chance of survival. Even if they were lucky enough not to die in the war, they might be contaminated by those monsters and be cleaned up by the Dragon Palace. The intruder only appeared after Qiu Niu and Blood Lady fought. If we could have made Qiu Niu and Blood Lady confront each other instead of fighting, the intruder might not have appeared, the fish-headed man said with confidence. Furthermore, it doesn't matter even if the intruder still appears. Even if it's more powerful than Chionyo and Blood Lady, I'm certain that it must have used a sneak attack to instantly kill the two mighty figures. If they knew of the intruder's existence in advance and fought together, they might not necessarily lose. The fish-headed man said confidently. That's right, even if it's stronger than Chionyo and Blood Lady, I'm certain that it must have used a sneak attack to instantly kill the two mighty figures. The fish-headed man's train of thought made the eyes of the demonic beasts, who were almost waiting for death, brighten. Chionyo and Blood Lady were not the top figures in the Dragon Palace, but their cultivation was top-notch. They were definitely T1 level existences in the battle sequence. How terrifying was the intruder's strength to be able to kill two powerful demonic beasts in a one-on-two fight. They could not imagine such a level, and they did not believe that there was such a terrifying existence in the sea. Such a figure might not be able to dominate the endless sea, but it definitely had the potential to be an overlord. This was because even the ancestral dragons of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas dared not say that they could instantly kill such a powerful figure like Longjio. The demonic beast scrambled to catch up to Chionyo. The warden, who had been hiding in the corner of the room, slowly raised his head. His huge eyes were bloodshot as he murmured, "There are some dangers that ants can't sense. A human's harmless stomp can kill a large number of ants that he can't see. The future can be changed, but our ending has already been decided." There was a way to get out of this situation. Whether it was Blood Lady or the mysterious intruder, they only had one goal. If they let Lin Yuan leave now, they might have a chance to live. Chapter 668. Beep, beep, beep. An unknown life form is detected approaching. Its combat power is suspected to be in the advanced stage of the demonic king realm. Host, please prepare for battle. The warning system that Lin Yuan had turned off long ago sounded again. Lin Yuan's face darkened. He turned off this function of the system not because he wanted to die, but because after his strength became tyrannical, he was always a hunter. He didn't need to avoid those predators, so before reaching a certain threshold, the system wouldn't alert him that something was approaching. And that threshold was something that could take his life in an instant. Even powerful demonic beasts like bartenders and dragonians did not deserve such a warning from the system. But now, an unknown life form was just approaching and the system was already sounding a piercing alarm. Was it coming for him? Lin Yuan's face changed several times. The parents of Crab General may be extremely powerful monsters, so powerful that the West Sea Dragon Palace needs to give them some face. But this does not mean that Lin Yuan will be afraid of the existence of the other party, because after Crab General's accident, the West Sea Dragon Palace began to conceal the whereabouts of Crab General, and the news reported was that he was missing. If General Crab's parents were so powerful that the West Sea Dragon Palace was afraid, they would not choose to hide. This was because no matter how important Lin Yuan was, he was just a dispensable help to the West Sea Dragon Palace. However, if Lin Yuan was willing to let the demonic The Arch Association step in, the one who would take the blame when they invaded the Green River Empire's territory would be Lin Yuan, not them. However, this did not mean that they would give up on this plan if Lin Yuan did not agree. It would just be a greater loss. If General Crab's parents could easily cause such a loss, the West Sea Dragon Palace would definitely hand Lin Yuan over to appease the fury of General Crab's parents. This was because the dragon palaces of the Four Seas had done this all these years. Even if they did not commit a grave mistake, if they offended a member of a top faction, even a pure-blooded demonic beast with dragon blood would be instantly labeled as an evil dragon. If they were not General Crab's parents, then they were the powerful figures behind the demonic beasts? However, from all aspects, if the other party was so powerful, why would they need to care about the West Sea Dragon Palace's reaction? Even if they were to break into this place, what was wrong with releasing all the imprisoned Sin Dragons? Lin Yuan wasn't narcissistic enough to think that he was the son of destiny. Even if that faction wanted to release him, they would at most send the so-called 8 distresses that the warden and the others had mentioned. Sending 2 or 3 8 distresses was already the limit. But looking at this guy, even if he was placed in that group of forces, he would definitely be a leader-level existence. Lin Yuan's pitch-black eyes turned slightly, and he began to think of his next step. He wasn't afraid of death. After all, it was just a puppet body. Even if it was torn apart, all it would lose was a strand of its divine sense. As for its main body, which was currently sealed in the beast pouch, although it wouldn't be able to escape in a short period of time, with the standards of the Northern Frontiers Ministry of Works, the beast pouch could only be used for 5 to 10 years at most before it lost its effect, unless someone mastered the art of repairing beast pouches and took it back to seal it. Otherwise, once the beast pouch lost its effect, Lin Yuan would be squeezed out even if he wanted to continue staying inside. On the other side, the fish-headed man quickly stepped forward and said in a deep voice before Qiu Niu pushed open the prison door, "Lord Qiu Niu, I have something to tell you." Qiu Niu turned his head expressionlessly and quietly looked at the fish-headed man. His facial features were like a stone sculpture, and he said without hiding anything, "Yes, I was transferred here by the Dragon Palace to assist you, but you have to understand the difference in status. If you want to teach me how to do things, I advise you not to open your mouth." At this point, a cold glint flashed in his purple vertical pupils, and he said coldly, "I have inherited the title of Qiu Niu for nearly 100 years. You are also considered the guards of the Dragon Palace, so you should have heard that my temper isn't very good, right?" The fish-headed man didn't hide the fear in his eyes. How could the master in front of him just have a bad temper? There was once a subordinate of the Dragon Palace who was in his way, and he was crushed alive by a giant seahorse that he rode. That wasn't the end of it. After that, it seemed to get angrier and angrier the more it thought about it. It directly gathered a group of subordinates of the Dragon Palace and killed more than 80% of the other party's tribe. If it wasn't for the fact that the Dragon Palace intervened because its methods were too cruel, that unlucky fellow's tribe might have been wiped out. It's like this. You should know the warden of this underwater prison. The fish-headed man adjusted his state of mind and suppressed the fear in his heart with great difficulty. I don't have time to pay attention to ants like you. Get to the point. Qiu Niu waved his hand and directly interrupted the fish-headed man's opening speech. He said coldly, "To be honest, I'm not in a good mood right now. The fellow outside has already destroyed more than half of the restrictions. Within 5 breaths, it will rush to the prison gate. If it appears in front of me before you finish speaking, then you will die with it." Qiu Niu had never taken Blood Lady seriously. The Dragon Palace of the West Sea was afraid of Blood Lady because there was a huge tribe behind her. Once Blood Lady's tribe started a war with the Dragon Palace, the other monster tribes wouldn't just stand by and watch. They would automatically split into 2 camps to fight. At that time, it wouldn't make a difference whether there were many who sided with the Dragon Palace or those who were independent of the Dragon Palace, because such a war would only make the current Dragon Palace worse. But the situation now was different. It was a serious crime to release an evil dragon without permission. Although everyone wasn't clean now and the Dragon Palace itself had released many evil dragons without permission, this kind of written rule still couldn't be disobeyed. It was fine if the Dragon Palace didn't want to make a fuss about it because they couldn't find any evidence. But if the Dragon Palace caught the act and wanted to make a fuss about it, even those who wanted to overthrow the Dragon Palace couldn't find an excuse to exonerate Blood Lady. Now that Blood Lady appeared outside the evil dragon pool and took the initiative to destroy the restriction here, the Dragon Palace was in the right. Even if it killed Blood Lady, the tribe behind it wouldn't dare to find trouble with the Dragon Palace. Even the tribe behind it might be listed as a key target by the Dragon Palace because of this matter. It would make a big show of killing the chicken to scare the monkeys and the subordinates of the Dragon Palace who were ready to make a move. The warden can predict what will happen in the future. He saw that not long after you fought with Blood Lady, a mysterious outsider killed you and Blood Lady with a sneak attack, so I thought, boom. Before the fish-headed man finished speaking, the prison gate was blown away by a strange force. A huge blood-red crab walked into the underwater prison horizontally. At this moment, the Demon King's momentum was not restrained at all. Chapter 669. Where is that black Jiao? The Blood Lady didn't seem to take Xiao seriously. She hadn't looked at Xiao since she broke into the underwater prison. Xiao's scholarly face after transforming into his human form twisted slightly. He didn't take the fish-headed man's words to heart. However, as a demon king, he didn't rely on his background to get the title of Son of the Dragon. No matter if it was the battle outside the Heaven Gate or the battle between the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the deformed creatures in the deep sea, Xiao had never been absent. Xiao had struggled between life and death countless times. Today, as the head of the 9 Sons of the Dragon Palace, he even had the strength to face 3 members of the 9 Sons of the Dragon Palace at the same time. An experienced warrior wouldn't be completely controlled by anger. When he heard the fish-headed man say that there was another intruder who was hiding nearby and waiting to ambush him, Xiao forced himself to calm down. He suppressed the gloom and anger in his heart and didn't attack the Blood Lady as soon as she appeared. Even so, the Blood Lady's vile attitude still infuriated it. He was Xiao. Was he not worthy of the Blood Lady's attention? She didn't even pretend to care about him. This was no longer a matter of not taking Xiao seriously. Ever since the appearance of those deformed bodies, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had been exhausted and had suffered countless defeats. Now, most of the loyal subordinates of the Dragon Palace were dead, and the rest were unruly people who did not take the Dragon Palace seriously. Even if the Dragon Palace gave orders to them, they would not listen. Blood Lady, it's a serious crime to break into the evil dragon pool. Xiao suppressed the anger in his heart and tried to calm down. He tried to persuade the Blood Lady to leave. Although it was angry, it wasn't in its best condition. It wouldn't have any problems dealing with Blood Lady, but fighting a monster of the same level as it would be too much for it to bear with its heavily injured body. Maybe it would really give the lurker an opportunity to attack. Blood Lady lowered her head and looked at Xiao. She sneered and said, "I was wondering who would have the guts to block my path. So it's the leader of the 9 Sons of the Dragon. But you don't look like a dragon at all. You look more like an ant-like human that you keep talking about all the time." It added in a strange tone. For a great demon like the Blood Lady, who did not put the Dragon Palace in her eyes, it was not a big deal to ridicule the members of the Dragon Palace. After all, everyone in the Endless Sea knew that the Dragon Palace had provoked an incredible existence. Even if they gathered the forces of the Four Seas, they were still retreating under the attack of the other party. Soon, they would have to retreat to the Tianwu continent to recuperate and no longer care about the trivial matters in the Endless Sea. In other words, the Dragon Palace was no longer qualified to govern them in the future. It was like a boss who was mean to you suddenly offended a powerful person in the company. However, he was fired because his right foot entered the company first. At this time, it was already very kind of you not to hit him when he was down. It was normal for you to ridicule him to vent your anger. In just a few years, the relationship between superiors and subordinates was like this. Then, the subordinates of the Dragon Palace, who had been oppressed by the Dragon Palace for thousands of years, now had an attitude towards the Dragon Palace. After all, your Red Crab clan has a history with the Dragon Palace. I won't make things difficult for you. Xiao acted as if he didn't hear the Blood Lady's sarcastic tone. He put his hands behind his back and said calmly, "If you leave now, I can pretend that nothing happened." "You want me to leave?" "Sure." The Blood Lady waved her 2 huge crab claws and said coldly, "Give me the black jiao. After I skin it and pull out its tendons, I will leave here. After this, the Red Crab clan will compensate for all the losses of the Dragon Palace in the West Sea according to the price." "That's impossible." Without waiting for Xiao to speak, the fish-head man growled. Xiao was temporarily deployed. Because of Lin Yuan's uniqueness, the Dragon Palace of the West Sea gave him the task of assisting the prison to set up the defense, in case the 8 distresses came to rescue the prisoner. However, they didn't specify which prisoner the 8 distresses were going to rescue. After all, although the plan of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was perfect, the inside wasn't clean. Whether it was the subordinates of the Dragon Palace who had ulterior motives or the members of the evil dragon who were unwilling to be restricted in the Endless Sea, they could all know part of the plan and leak it. Even the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas didn't fully trust someone like the Dragon Josie. Other than the person in charge who followed the whole process, the rest of the members only received a certain order to carry out the steps of the big plan separately. Therefore, Chiao Nyo didn't know the importance of Lin Yuan. At this juncture, with Chiao Nyo's personality, he wouldn't care about the misfortune of an ordinary prisoner. Sir Chiao Nyo, that Black Jiao isn't a prisoner. However, he's very useful to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Because he refused to cooperate, he was temporarily imprisoned here. Your main goal this time is to ensure that the Black Jiao is under our control. Due to the urgency of the situation, the fish-head man couldn't care less about hiding anything. He directly told Chiao Nyo about Lin Yuan's uniqueness. Although he didn't say it in detail, for someone like Chiao Nyo, even if it was just a small addition, he could connect a lot of information that he didn't know. You heard that? Although Chiao Nyo was shocked, he looked at Blood Lady calmly and said in a deep voice, "The Black Jiao you want isn't a prisoner of the Dragon Palace. Therefore, we don't have the right to deal with him. Like I said before, if you leave now, I can pretend that nothing happened. However, if you insist on being stubborn, The cold snort at the end didn't hide his killing intent. Chiao Nyo was already dissatisfied with these unruly subordinates of the Dragon Palace. In addition, he wasn't in a good mood at the moment. Blood Lady didn't seem to care about him at all. Therefore, if he couldn't avoid this battle, he wouldn't hesitate at all. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that there might be someone lurking around, he would have already rushed out to attack Blood Lady before she even opened the prison door. I've experienced the rules of the West Sea Dragon Palace. Blood Lady laughed coldly and said in a strange tone, since when was a conversation between titled Demon Kings allowed for a small fry who had just entered the Demon King realm to interrupt? If this was in my red crab race, just because you suddenly spoke, we would have to wipe out 3 races. As soon as she finished speaking, Blood Lady seemed to be furious. A huge crab claw suddenly swung down and smashed towards the fish-head man. The terrifying wind even created 2 waterspouts in the sea. No one doubted the strength of that claw. Chapter 670. Buzz. Chiao Nyo's jade-white fist came out of his sleeve and hit the crab pincer like a snake coming out of its hole. The surrounding seawater shook violently, but Blood Lady and Chiao Nyo did not move at all. Since when did you bastards have the right to teach Dragon Palace the rules? Chiao Nyo maintained his punching posture and wrestled with Blood Lady. He said in a deep voice, "It seems that you have forgotten what reverence is. Remember, as long as Dragon Palace does not leave, you will be Dragon Palace's slaves. Think before you speak. Don't bring endless disaster to the entire Red Crab clan because of your words." Under Blood Lady's sarcasm and aggressiveness, Chiao Nyo could not hold it in anymore. How could a mere Dragon Palace subordinate be so arrogant? He knew that the fish-headed man had broken the rules by speaking. If it was any other occasion, people would laugh at Dragon Palace for having no rules. However, this was an internal problem of Dragon Palace. Even if there was a punishment, it should be Dragon Palace. A bastard from Dragon Palace dared to touch a subordinate of Dragon Palace in front of him? Seeing that Chiao Nyo and Blood Lady were still fighting, the fish-headed man opened his mouth slightly, as if he wanted to say something. However, he could not squeeze out a word. The future did not change after all. Chiao Nyo and Blood Lady almost turned into a beam of light and moved back and forth, disturbing the entire sea. The light of various spells almost illuminated the sea. Endless vibrations and whirlpools appeared out of thin air. If it weren't for the fact that the fish head was also a demon king, it would have been torn to shreds by the shockwaves from the clash. However, with its current strength, it was already doing its best to withstand the shockwaves from the clash between the two. If either of them were to attack it directly, it would probably die on the spot without any effort at all. They were both in the Demon King realm, but even if the difference was only 1 day of cultivation, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. Not to mention Chiao Nyo and Blood Lady, who were in the middle stage of the Demon King realm. If either of them wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as moving a finger. Then, in the warden's prophecy, the existence that killed Chionyo and Blood Lady in an instant, how powerful was it? Was the lurker really able to kill two middle-stage demon kings in a sneak attack just as they had guessed? Or was it that the lurker's combat strength was far above that of a middle-stage demon king, even if it was 1 versus 2? Boom! A loud noise was heard. Chionyo quickly retreated and stood beside the fish head once again. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of black blood. His originally scholarly face was now so twisted that it was impossible to tell his original appearance. He was even more terrifying than ordinary fey beasts. Blood Lady, who appeared right after him, was clearly not in a good condition either. Her left pincer was full of fist marks, and her right pincer was missing. Thick, clear liquid kept flowing out of the broken pincer. Since she did not have any humanoid features, he could not see her expression. However, the fish-headed man was sure that Blood Lady was even angrier than when she first arrived. It was not that the broken pincer could not grow back, but the price that had to be paid was definitely unimaginable. Just like how a human could transform their chi into gang chi after reaching the Heaven Star border realm, they could basically rely on martial arts and spells to fight. Similarly, fey beasts also needed to rely on various natural abilities to derive spells after reaching a high realm. It was rare for fey beasts to rely on their physique like Blood Lady. At the same time, it could be guessed that the strength of Blood Lady's body that she was so confident in was definitely not something that ordinary fey beasts of the same realm could use spells to make up for. Chionyo, you deserve to die. Blood Lady was like an evil spirit that crawled out from hell. Her voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears, and it contained deep resentment. Chionyo spat a few mouthfuls of blood to the side with a cold face. Then, he wiped the black blood on his face with his sleeve and said coldly, "Even if I deserve to die, I am not someone that a bastard like you can take my life. I gave you a chance. Now, even if you want to leave, it's too late. Come and accept your death." As his voice fell, Chionyo seemed to have adjusted his state. Without a moment's pause, he directly rushed towards Blood Lady. Blood Lady, who had just fought with Chionyo, was scared out of her wits. She did not dare to show her attitude at all. Instead, she frantically fled towards the distance, turning into a red light again. Her speed was several times faster than when she fought with Chionyo just now. When Blood Lady heard about how powerful Chionyo was, she did not take it seriously at all. After all, no one would really take it seriously. However, after fighting with Chionyo, Blood Lady realized that the so-called son of Longjiozi was not as simple as being in the middle of the Fey King realm. Her treasured body had been tempered by countless kinds of spiritual items. Not to mention being injured, even if an ordinary Fey King used his full strength, he might not feel any pain. However, in the short fight just now, Chionyo relied on a series of spells that were not uncommon in the Dragon Palace to forcefully break one of her pincers. It should be known that Chionyo was now in a state of serious injury. As long as Chionyo could still unleash more than 50% of his combat power, he would not retreat from the front line to recuperate. If Chionyo was in his peak state, the fight just now might not have been as simple as breaking one of her pincers. It's over. Lord Chionyo is really angry. The fish-headed man looked at the two streaks of light, one chasing and one escaping. His expression was extremely ugly. Although Chionyo did not lose any parts, the fight just now had caused him to suffer serious internal injuries. The time he needed to recuperate would probably be extended for another half a year. Moreover, he might not be able to recover to his peak state even after he recovered. How could Chionyo suppress his anger? Between Blood Lady and Chionyo today, one of them was definitely going to die. However, the only good news was that the future seemed to have really changed. This was because until now, the lurker hiding in the dark had not appeared, and the members of the 8 distresses had not appeared either. Other than Blood Lady, who was an uninvited guest, everything was as peaceful as yesterday. Until Chionyo and Blood Lady flashed past the fish-headed man's sight for the 371st time. These two fellows, one chasing and one escaping, had actually been running in circles around the underwater prison. Moreover, it seemed like they did not realize this at all. After all, any normal creature would not choose to run in circles around a large flat area that did not have any cover to help them shake off their pursuers. What was even weirder was that they were all running at full speed. The distance of 371 laps was not short. This was a prison that caged more than 100,000 prisoners. Counting the functional facilities and activity areas, the undersea prison occupied more than 5 million square meters. Chapter 671. Lord Xiao. Lord Xiao. The beasts that were slowly approaching, including the fish-headed man, also noticed that something was wrong. Every time Xiao and Blood Lady passed by them, they would try to call out to them. However, their calls were never answered. It was as if Xiao couldn't hear them at all. Lord Xiao and Blood Lady might have fallen into an illusion. The fish-headed man voiced his conjecture with an ugly expression. It seemed that the future didn't change much. That mysterious person still came. Although it didn't suddenly appear and kill Xiao and Blood Lady like the warden said, the current situation was worse than them being killed instantly. 2 mid-stage beast kings, and one of them was even a titled battle pet warrior. Unknowingly, they had fallen into the illusion and were unable to extricate themselves. They were constantly consuming their physical strength and beast kings, but they didn't even know where their opponent was. They were almost in a hopeless situation. What should we do now? The sea turtle beast's expression was just as ugly. Previously, it swore that it didn't feel any danger. However, after the fight between Xiao and Blood Lady, it felt a huge sense of danger. It was a tremor that came from the depths of its soul. Until now, when it spoke, it had been relying on the support of the beasts around it. Even when it spoke, its teeth were chattering non-stop. Since the other party didn't show up directly and used illusions to control Lord Xiao and Blood Lady, it means that the other party might not be as powerful as we thought. If Lord Xiao and Blood Lady work together, the other party might have to retreat. The fish-headed man clenched his teeth and said fiercely, "Let's risk it. Find a way to wake up Lord Xiao and Blood Lady. They are our only hope now." As soon as he finished speaking, the fish-headed man suddenly rushed forward and blocked Xiao's path. The two instantly collided. The fish-headed man rolled twice and slid more than 10 meters away. However, Xiao was still moving at a high speed, as if nothing had happened. Stupid. Lin Yuan, who was secretly spying on the battlefield with the eye of God, frowned and cursed in a low voice. Unknowingly, the 2 mid-stage demonic king realm demonic beasts fell into an illusion. Although the method was a little underhanded, to be able to use illusions to such a degree was not something that anyone could do. If it was possible to rely on physical impact to wake them up, the person hiding in the dark would definitely not allow the fish-headed man and the other early-stage demonic king realm demonic beasts to watch the show. From the very beginning, the opponent had entered the battle with the mentality of a cat toying with a mouse. Crack. Crack. When the fish-headed man was sent flying for the 7th time, a muscular man slowly walked out from behind a clump of seaweed while cracking his knuckles. He waved his right hand lightly, and a cloud of dark green powder rolled towards the group of demonic beasts. Poison. Retreat. The sea turtle demonic beasts, who were the most sensitive to danger, almost subconsciously retreated. At the same time, they opened their mouths to remind their companions not to fall into the trap. The burly man smiled as he looked at the group of demonic beasts that were retreating quickly. He had no intention of chasing after them. After the dark green powder corroded 2 demonic beasts that couldn't dodge in time into white bones, he opened his mouth and said, "Originally, I wanted to move around a bit, but looking at you bunch of trash, I have no appetite at all." The fish-headed man glared at the muscular man and said coldly, "May I ask which of the 8 distresses you are?" It was hard to say who this mysterious person was, but the Black Jiao's matter had only involved 3 factions so far. This muscular man should be one of the mysterious 8 distresses on the evil dragon's side. However, the 8 distresses had always been mysterious. Even the West Sea Dragon Palace only knew that there was an 8 distresses in the evil dragon's camp that could challenge Longjosi, but they had never found out the specific identity of the 8 distresses. Currently, only the 8 distresses that had fought were the birth distresses, sickness distresses, and love separation distresses. However, this was the first time this muscular man had appeared. 8 distresses? Never heard of them. The muscular man was slightly startled. Then, he shook his head with a smile and said, "However, you can think of who I am as you like. Just give me the black Jiao. I don't want to waste my energy on you." As he spoke, the muscular man walked toward the prison. It was as if Qiu Niu, Blood Lady, and the subordinates of the Dragon Palace were nothing in his eyes. "Since you are not a member of the 8 distresses and you look unfamiliar, you must not have any grudges with the Dragon Palace. Forgive me for being blunt, but the Black Jiao is very important to the Dragon Palace. If you are willing to leave, I can make the decision to give you a handsome reward. How about it?" The fish-headed man stared at the approaching muscular man and said with a serious expression. Although he did not believe that this muscular man had nothing to do with the evil dragon, since he did not admit that he was a member of the 8 distresses, the fish-headed man did not mind using the greatest advantage of the Dragon Palace and using unimaginable wealth to make the muscular man retreat. The muscular man continued to walk forward and said coldly, "I really don't understand how the brains of you monsters work. Can't you understand what I mean? Either you give me the Black Jiao and I leave, or I kill all of you and then find the Black Jiao. Furthermore, the Dragon Palace can't even take care of itself now. You may have to give up your territory in the endless sea and run away at any time. What's the use of promising me more benefits?" The fish-headed man was speechless. The law of the jungle had always been like this. The choice was always in the hands of the strong. If it was someone at the level of the Dragon King, he could definitely decide whether to hand over the Black Jiao in exchange for his own safety. However, a minion like him never had the chance to make a choice. If he did not cooperate with the muscular man in front of him, it would not be difficult for him to kill him with his unpredictable methods. Even Qiu Niu would not be able to escape this disaster. However, if he let go of the Black Jiao, the Dragon Palace would definitely not let him go. To him, Qiu Niu had to be safe, and the Black Jiao had to be under his control. If he could not fulfill either of these two conditions, he would definitely end up in a tragic state. "It seems that you have chosen to refuse." A cold smile appeared on the muscular man's face. In the next moment, endless dark green light surged from his body. It was as if he had just casually used the method of corroding the 2 early-stage demonic beasts into white bones. It was as if he was just saying hello to them. The fish-headed man and the other demonic beasts kept retreating, but the muscular man continued to close in. The dark green poisonous fog condensed into a huge skeleton behind him. At this moment, it was waving its dark green bone claws at them. Chapter 672. Within the prison, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Observing the battle through the eye of the god, he realized that the dark green half-body skeleton was not using some kind of poison the moment it appeared. The dark green powder was actually tiny insects. The method that could instantly corrode the Demon King realm demonic beasts into white bones was just a facade. In fact, the 2 demonic beasts that did not have time to retreat were all devoured by these insects. To deal with this method, one could only use various techniques to bombard the dark green insect swarm. There was no point in those demonic beasts retreating at this moment. It would only further reduce their space of movement, which would only make them more passive. After all, the dark green insects were not poisonous gas, nor was it an innate ability of the other party. They were some kind of strange insects that were reared. It was impossible for their numbers to be endless. As long as the speed of killing was faster than the growth of the insects, there was really nothing to be afraid of. The eye of the god failed 3 times in a row, and it could not see the other party's attributes. However, from Lin Yuan's experience, the other party should be mainly cultivating illusions. The large swarm of strange insects around him already proved that the other party was not good at close combat. There was still a chance of survival if they counterattacked, but retreating would only leave them with nowhere to retreat. However, Lin Yuan had no intention of reminding the fish-headed man. In any case, none of the demonic beasts present were on the same side as him. Even if they all died, he would not feel any heartache. If he could rely on the fish-headed man to find the weakness of the other party, it would be worth it. Although he did not know why the other party was here, he was sure that the other party was here for him. However, this burly man denied that he was one of the 8 distresses. If that was true, then not only did he not have any grudges with the Dragon Palace, he also did not have any grudges with Lin Yuan. Therefore, under these circumstances, this burly man coming to find him could really be said to be a friend or foe. It was always right to be prepared. One after another, the demonic beasts were devoured by the dark green insects. The fish-headed man's group had already retreated to the prison's activity area, and was not far from the prisoner's living area. From Lin Yuan's point of view, the fish-headed man's group was bound to lose. With only a few cats and kittens left, they would not even be able to break through the other party's insect swarm, not to mention that the other party had not even made a move yet. It's about time. Lin Yuan lowered his head and muttered. His pitch-black eyes flashed brightly. 2 imperceptible divine senses suddenly spread out. Xiao Niu and Blood Lady, who had been constantly chasing after each other, finally stopped, panting heavily. They just happened to see the fish-headed man and his group being forced to retreat. There really are spies. Xiao Niu's purple pupils suddenly shrank to the size of needles. He took 2 deep breaths as he recovered his demonic chi. He walked towards the burly man with killing intent in his eyes, but he hid his aura very well. He only stopped when he was 3 meters behind the burly man. Seeing that the burly man didn't notice his presence, Xiao Niu's face was filled with joy. Whoosh! Along with the sharp sound of wind breaking, Xiao Niu's right hand suddenly transformed into a brown dragon claw and stabbed towards the muscular man's back. Clang! The brawny man twisted his body and his right hand stretched out like a snake. The fist and the claw collided, and the sound of metal clashing against metal could be heard. Xiao Niu let out a puzzled sound when his attack didn't hit. Although the power contained in the brawny man's punch wasn't terrifying, he was able to fight evenly with Xiao Niu in a hurry. This brawny man's physical strength was probably not inferior to a body-refining demonic beast at the early stage of the demonic king realm. However, this was completely different from what Xiao Niu had imagined. A demonic beast that used illusions to restrain Xiao Niu and Blood Lady and then released poison to attack other demonic beasts. This kind of fighting style definitely didn't belong to a body-refining demonic beast that gave up on demonic chi and talent to focus on tempering its body. After all, Xiao Niu was an existence that had been on the battlefield many times. Although he had just regained consciousness, he subconsciously classified the brawny man as a support existence. Therefore, although this claw attack was a quick, accurate, and ruthless sneak attack, he didn't consider any mistakes. Naturally, he didn't prepare a way to retreat or a backup plan. Now that his attack had failed, he was suspended in mid-air, and the surrounding sea was filled with poison. He couldn't borrow any strength even if he wanted to. That's why the most annoying thing about you people is that you like to jump out and cause trouble when others are having the time of their lives. The brawny man calmly retracted his fist and looked indifferently at Xiao Niu's body that had recovered slowly retreated. He didn't seem to have any intention of chasing. Still a bug? In the prison, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and had a puzzled expression. It was hard to say how strong the brawny man was, but when he turned around to catch Xiao Niu's sneak attack, a dark blue fluorescent light flashed on his hand. It was because of this fluorescent light that Lin Yuan carefully observed the brawny man. However, with just a glance, Lin Yuan's expression changed again. His puzzled expression turned serious at this moment. In this dark and oppressive deep sea, if one didn't look carefully, even with a skill like the eye of the god, few would notice the fluorescent light flashing on the brawny man's hand. They wouldn't even carefully observe the brawny man himself. This brawny man wasn't human at all. To be precise, it was hard to say whether he was a demonic beast or not. This guy was the same as the skeleton behind him. They were all made up of tiny bugs. Was this guy just an illusion, or was his real body like this? After Chionyo regained his footing, the burly man stood up and punched out with his right fist. However, at the instant he punched out, his entire body strangely split apart. It was like a monster in Resident Evil opening its mouth and splitting into several pieces. And there were indeed fangs on the torn flesh. It was as if when he punched out, his right hand had turned into a monster's mouth. "You are a mutant." Chionyo's expression changed drastically. He quickly jumped back as if he was avoiding a snake. He didn't dare to take the brawny man's punch head-on. As soon as he said that, the fish-headed man and the other demon beasts' expressions changed drastically. They didn't care about destroying the dark green poisonous gas and directly turned to run towards the prison, as if the deformed person that Chionyo spoke of was some kind of scourge. No, it was even scarier than a scourge. After the infiltrator appeared, the fish head didn't expect to be able to escape unscathed. It could even be said that it was prepared to die. If it was just death, it wouldn't be enough to make them stop and run away so decisively. Lin Yuan suddenly became interested in the so-called mutant. Chapter 673. Lin Yuan couldn't scare these Dragon Palace subordinates. No matter what he did, he would always be seen as a prisoner. Even if he was at the northern frontier, it wasn't enough to make these monsters who lived in the endless sea feel fear. But now, the simple words aberrant made these Dragon Palace subordinates avoid him like he was a snake. In the blink of an eye, the fish head dragged the warden and rushed to the outside of Lin Yuan's cell. The trembling warden was looking for the key to open Lin Yuan's cell door. Clearly, even at this moment, Lin Yuan wasn't one of the Dragon Palace subordinates who had been abandoned. If it were any other prisoner, they would have long forgotten about them. Lin Yuan leaned against the door frame and said calmly, "What's going on outside? I don't remember any prisoners being able to leave their rooms after free time ends. You two can't be planning to come in and be locked up with me, right?" Hearing Lin Yuan's words, the fish head and the warden subconsciously shuddered. The existence of the Black Flood Dragon was no different from a nightmare for this underwater prison. A group of ferocious prisoners were even forced by Lin Yuan to start practicing battle formations every day in order to ensure that the tacit understanding of team cooperation could be better and that they could persist until the end of the free time under the attack of those dark monsters. Aberrants were terrifying, but those black monsters with the ability to assimilate were also terrifying. Therefore, the fish head didn't think that anyone would pay attention to Lin Yuan's crazy thoughts. In order to avoid the monsters, they had to stay with another monster. The warden turned his head to look at the fish head with a bitter expression and said slowly, "Old Purple, there's only one exit to this underwater prison. Right now, Lord Chionyo is fighting with the aberrant. Looking at the entire prison, we really can't find a safer place than the Black Jiao." The aberrant's ability was very strange. As long as it wanted to, it could wipe out the entire prison in minutes. If they wanted to live, they could only choose to stay with Lin Yuan, because only a monster could fight another monster. "There's no secret exit?" The fish-headed man looked at the warden in disbelief and asked in a probing manner. None of the prisoners in the undersea prison were ordinary prisoners. The escape of the evil dragon was not a big deal. Sometimes, there would be riots. Therefore, as a precaution, every warden had the ability to seal the prison from the inside. As long as the people outside did not want to open the seal, all the creatures in the prison would have to wait to die of hunger and thirst. However, not all wardens were willing to sacrifice their lives for their profession. Therefore, most wardens would build a secret passage in their office that led directly to the outside of the prison to ensure that the warden, some important staff members, and prisoners could escape the disaster. But from the warden's words, it seemed like he hadn't prepared any secret passages at all. It's not like you don't know that although the prisoners here are all sentenced to death, their brains are still quite good. The conditions I give them are also very lenient. As long as they don't cause any big trouble, I usually turn a blind eye. How can I build a so-called tunnel or something like that? The warden slowly spread out his hands and said in a deep voice, I don't need that thing. Moreover, it's too extravagant to spend so many resources to build a one-time secret passage. I'd rather use the money in other ways. With someone like the warden in charge, the prisoners in this undersea prison could kill each other if they wanted to. However, if anyone crossed the line, the warden would teach them what it meant to be strong. Moreover, the expenses of the undersea prison were not small. Even if the Dragon Palace allocated an astronomical amount of money every year, it was still the same. In the warden's opinion, a secret passage that was used to seal the exit of the prison was really useless. Moreover, the secret passage, which had cost a lot of money to build, could not be used again. In order to ensure that none of the prisoners inside could escape, the first thing the warden had to do after leaving was to trigger the mechanism and ignite the explosives buried deep on both sides of the wall of the secret passage, directly destroying the entire secret passage. But now, because the warden didn't need it, they were suffocated to death in the prison. They didn't know what was going on outside, mainly because they didn't have the guts to go out and investigate the situation. Moreover, the fish-headed man still remembered to run to the warden's office to pull out the warden who was hiding in the corner and release Lin Yuan from the prison together. Judging from their behavior, the fish-headed man had already performed well. The rest of the demon beasts were now hiding in some unknown corner. The only thing they could do about the battle outside was to pray that Chionyo could defeat the aberrant creature. But the problem was, could Chionyo definitely win against the aberrant creature? Even if Chionyo could defeat the aberrant creature, would Chionyo still be Chionyo after that? The scariest thing about the aberrant creatures wasn't that they didn't fear death, but that the aberrant creatures had a strong mental influence. Even if they didn't have any contact with the aberrant creature, as long as they stared at the aberrant creature, they would be influenced. Depending on the individual's willpower, the changes brought about by this influence would be different. It might not change at all, but it was also possible to wake up and find that you had become a deformed monster. Clang! The prison's door slowly opened. Lin Yuan turned around and blocked the entrance. He said expressionlessly, "What's going on outside?" From the looks of it, something big has happened. The fish-headed man looked meaningfully at Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "Black Jiao, pay attention to your status. You are only a prisoner now. Whatever happens outside has nothing to do with you. Let us in. We will tell you what we should tell you when the situation outside is resolved." He didn't want to communicate with Black Jiao at all. This guy was a classic troublemaker. He had only been in the Dragon Palace for half a month, but he had caused a huge commotion in the entire West Sea Dragon Palace. It was fine if he attracted a monster king like Blood Lady. At the very least, although the Red Crab race was strong, they didn't have the guts to start a war with the West Sea Dragon Palace. The West Sea Dragon Palace found the 8 distresses troublesome, but it wasn't an unsolvable problem. But now that the aberrant creature had appeared, the situation had instantly changed. The aberrant creature that had forced the Dragon Palace to give up their territory in the Endless Sea and run to the Tianwu continent had appeared here. Moreover, it was trying to take Lin Yuan away. This matter was more complicated than it seemed on the surface. Perhaps the aberrant creature already knew that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had the opportunity to move to the continent. It was trying to use Lin Yuan's identity to remove their deployment one by one and completely trap the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas in the Endless Sea. Some things were enough to make him shudder just by thinking about it. Chapter 674. Although the aberrations were strange and crazy, they were not without intelligence. The words they could not speak were more like a special language. If they were really a bunch of brainless things, how could they force the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas to this extent? Then you have to tell me what the aberrations are, right? Lin Yuan had a fake smile on his face as he said in a deep voice, that Lord Xiaonyo is now holding his head and rolling on the ground. Furthermore, his chin is full of tentacle-like whiskers. If it was not for the fact that he wanted to reveal his true form and use his ultimate move, this aberration would be very bad. The warden and the fish-head man looked at each other and said in unison, "You can see the outside?" Lin Yuan nodded slightly and said indifferently, "The materials used to build this underwater prison are very good. Even if I used all my strength, I could not even leave a fist mark on the wall. This kind of prison is more than enough to imprison existences in the advanced stage of the desolate demon realm. It's a pity that you can't block out telepathic thoughts. I don't know if it's because you want to spy on me or something else, but on the other hand, I can also use telepathic thoughts to monitor your every move." The fish-head man's expression became more and more shocked. It was true that this prison could not block out telepathic thoughts, but there were formations and restrictions below the prison. Even for the fish-head man, his telepathic thoughts could only barely pass through 2 to 3 cells. However, from what Lin Yuan said, it seemed that he could directly use telepathic thoughts to observe the situation outside the prison. How was this possible? To be honest, I do want to know what the aberrations are. In exchange, I can tell you some information that can save your lives. Lin Yuan crossed his arms in front of his chest and said in a deep voice, "The one you fought with wasn't a human. The dark green poisonous smoke it released was actually just some insects that could bite through demonic energy and the flesh of demonic beasts. According to its command, the insects were arranged into a formation, which resulted in the green half-body skeleton that you saw. In fact, if you had attacked with all your strength at the beginning, there was at least an 80% chance that you would have killed those insects. However, you lost your courage at the beginning and retreated again and again. You even lost a few lives because of this, which is why you ended up in this state." At this point, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and continued, "Other than those dark green insects, that guy's body is also made up of insects. Although I don't know if it's the real body or if it did it on purpose, there's no doubt that it's powerful. Just the combined strength of those insects is enough to crush your Sir Chionyo." The fish-headed man's breathing stagnated as he asked, "That's impossible. If there really is such a tyrannical existence, then there's no way he would be unknown in the endless sea. I've served the Dragon Palace for more than 300 years, and there's not a single expert in the endless sea that I don't know. Unless this guy is like you, an outsider. Who it is, what it is, where it came from, these are not questions." Lin Yuan's expression turned serious as he coldly said, "Tell me about the mutant, and we'll talk about the rest later. That thing is about to rush over, so at least let me know what it is and how to deal with it, right? Don't look at it. Definitely don't look at it. Maybe you'll hear some whispers, but ignore it. Just pretend that nothing happened. No matter what it looks like or what it wants to tell you, just ignore it. Just remember this." The fish-headed man swallowed a few mouthfuls of saliva as if he had thought of something terrifying. He said in a deep voice, "Regarding the mutant, no matter what it is, the more you know, the crazier you become. The crazier you become, the more abnormal you become." Hearing the fish-headed man's words, the corner of Lin Yuan's mouth twitched slightly. He had heard of the saying, "The more you know, the more ignorant you feel." But what did it mean that the more you know, the crazier you become? What did those mutants know that made them turn into monsters? Black Jiao, I'm serious. Don't think about luck, and don't try to find out what happened behind them. There was a dragon ancestor in the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas who wanted to know where these mutants came from and why they attacked the Endless Sea. In the end, that dragon ancestor was not lucky enough to escape and became the strongest mutant we know of to date. Lin Yuan's footsteps paused. He lightly swung his right hand, and a large amount of nether realm black water was thrown out from the puppet's palm. When it landed, it had already turned into pitch-black monsters bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws. These nether river creatures did not need Lin Yuan's orders because the nether river that imprisoned them was Lin Yuan himself. Lin Yuan's thoughts were the nether river's thoughts. After these nether river creatures appeared, they flew towards the approaching figure. At this moment, Chionyo had completely turned into a monster. The upper half of his head looked like a dragon, but the lower half of his head had turned into a disgusting octopus tentacles. His 4 limbs had turned into thick and powerful claws, and his skin had turned gray. His wrists and ankles were filled with sharp barbs. When Chionyo moved, he was crawling on all fours like an animal. As if he was afraid of these pitch-black monsters, Chionyo rushed into the prison at full speed. He even kept circling around as if he was looking for a weak point so that he could kill his way to Lin Yuan in one go. Roar! Chionyo opened his mouth and let out a fierce roar. When he opened his mouth, a worm-like snake head slid out of his mouth. This tongue even had a pair of eyes. Whether it was through the eye of the god or the Nether River creature's feedback, Lin Yuan could clearly see that the worm-like tongue's eyes were filled with greed. It was as if it wanted to eat all the living things it saw alive. He did not know if it was because he had not faced these things directly, but Lin Yuan did not feel uncomfortable at all. However, the fish head's words made Lin Yuan feel like he had to keep them to himself. A true dragon had been affected by these aberrations and became the strongest aberration known to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. The ability of these things to infect others was indeed terrifying. If one could not help but face these aberrations directly and communicate with the whispers in their ears, no matter how powerful one was, they would probably become one of the aberrations. For the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas to be able to come up with the method of not looking, ignoring, and forgetting, it was probably because they had paid the price of countless lives. However, this method only treated the symptoms and not the root cause. Using this method to fight against the aberrations in the endless sea was courting death. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.